Committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. We welcome everyone to today's hearing on oversight of the Office of Special Counsel Jack Smith. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Florida to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll begin today's hearing with opening statements. The chair is now recognized for an opening statement. It was always about politics. And to get President Trump, they were willing to do just about anything. January 7th, 2023, Kevin McCarthy becomes Speaker of the House. 16 days later, Jack Smith issues a subpoena for his phone records. Phone records from 2 years prior for a 2-month time frame, Election Day 2020 to January 7th, 2021. Jack Smith and the Biden Justice Department get the phone records of the top Republican in government, the guy second in line to the president. They know who he called, who called him, when the call took place, and how long it lasted. You can pattern an individual's life. They know who the speaker talked to before big votes, who he talked to after big votes, when he calls his colleagues, when he calls his family. And to add insult to injury, they go to the judge with the subpoena for a gag order on the carrier. AT&T, don't tell your customer, the Speaker of the House, that you just gave his phone calls to Jack Smith and Joe Biden. And here's the kicker. They say to the court, we need this gag order because he's a flight risk. Someone might tamper with witnesses or with evidence. Are you kidding me? The Speaker of the House is going to run? They got my phone records for 2.5 years. Even the Democrats said this was wrong. But of course, we shouldn't be surprised. Democrats have been going after President Trump for 10 years, for a decade. And the country should never, ever forget what they did. Over the next few hours, we're going to hear a lot of yelling and screaming, I assume, from the other side. But we should never forget what took place, what they did to the guy, we the people, elected president twice. It all started in 2016 when they spied on his campaign. The Clinton campaign hired the law firm Perkins Coie, who hired the public relations firm Fusion GPS, who hired a foreigner, Christopher Steele, to put together the fake dossier. Bunch of garbage in that document, but that was used by Jim Comey's FBI. And we all know Jim Comey. He was the guy who just last year was strolling along the beach when the good Lord had the waves wash up on shore, seashells in the formation of 8647. That guy took that dossier to the FISA court, lied to the court, and then spied on the other party's campaign. This, of course, led to the Mueller investigation, 2.5 years, 19 lawyers, 40 agents, $30 million to find nothing. No conspiracy, no coordination whatsoever. Then it was impeachment 1, the anonymous whistleblower. We couldn't even know who was bringing the charge against the guy they were trying to take it, the guy we elected, who were they trying to kick out of office. We couldn't know. Secret hearings in the bunker, in the basement of the Capitol. Again, nothing. Then it was impeachment 2. No secret hearings here because they didn't have any hearings. It was the snap impeachment, and the Senate trial actually took place after President Trump wasn't in office. Then, of course, it was Alvin Bragg, who said before he got elected district attorney that there was no case here. Then he gets elected and changes his mind when the left starts pressuring him to go after President Trump. He hires Michael Colangelo, former Democrat National Committee consultant, and the number 3 guy at the Department of Justice. And then, of course, it's Fani and Nathan, Fani Willis and Nathan Wade in Fulton County, Georgia. We actually deposed Mr. Wade, one of the most interesting depositions I've sat through. We said to him, you know, you billed taxpayers in Georgia thousands of dollars for meetings in D.C. with the January 6th committee and with the Biden administration. And we asked him some questions. Who'd you talk to, Mr. Wade? He couldn't remember. We said, where'd you meet? Did you meet the Capitol? Did you meet the White House? Where'd you meet? Couldn't remember that either. We said, were these meetings in person, on the phone, or did you have a Zoom meeting? Couldn't remember, couldn't remember, couldn't remember. We finally just asked him, did you really come to DC and meet people? He said, oh yeah, I came, and I billed the taxpayers. I know I came, just no idea who he talked to or what he did. And then there was the raid on President Trump's home, you know, where they searched Barron's room and the First Lady's closet. In our deposition with Stephen D'Antuono, head of the FBI Washington field office, he told us none of the normal process, none of the normal protocol was followed in the investigation. He said, first of all, the case was run out of DC. Normally you run it out of the Miami field office. No, we're gonna run it out of DC. He said he recommended, and the people in the FBI at the time in the Washington field office recommended they give the president notice before they do the search, or at least when they got there, before they start the search, call the president's lawyers, ask them to come there and meet them and conduct the search together. Again, the answer from Maine Justice was no. Which brings us back to Mr. Smith. On November 18th, 2022, 3 days after President Trump announces he's running for president, Attorney General Garland names Jack Smith special counsel. One of the first things Mr. Smith does is put on his team the very people responsible for the raid on President Trump's home. The very people. And then Jack Smith also puts on his team the people responsible for getting the phone records of dozens of members of Congress. People like Thomas Wyndham, who when we deposed him, took the fifth 71 times. We've actually referred him to the Justice Department for obstructing our investigation. Jack Smith then gets a gag order in his investigation on President Trump from Judge Chutkan without filing a single affidavit with the court from a witness or a potential witness that they felt threatened by statements from the president. Stop and think about it. Jack Smith restricts the speech of the former president while he's a candidate for president. Thank goodness Mr. Smith was slapped down on appeal and the order was changed. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, the Washington Post editorial page, Jack Smith would have blown a hole in the First Amendment. I just want to read 2 sentences from this. Mr. Smith seemed unconcerned about interfering in the democratic process by seeking to muzzle a candidate for high office. 3 appellate judges, all nominated by Democrat presidents, ruled that Mr. Smith's proposed gag order infringed on President Trump's First Amendment rights. And of course they did. And this wasn't the only time Mr. Smith lost in court. In the classified documents case in Miami, Judge Cannon held that Mr. Smith was not permitted to be special counsel. Jack Smith was never properly appointed. In fact, he couldn't be properly appointed because he was never confirmed by the Senate for any position in the executive branch as the law requires. Here's what Judge Cannon stated. Quote, the special counsel's position effectively usurps that important legislative authority, transferring it to a head of department and in the process threatening the structural liberty inherent in the separation of powers. And of course, on July 1st, 2024, the United States Supreme Court ruled that President Trump had immunity for actions taken in his official capacity as the president. 1 month later, after this decision by the Supreme Court, Jack Smith files a superseding indictment on August 27, 2024. But Mr. Smith doesn't stop there. He does something unprecedented. On October 2nd, he files a motion with the court before President Trump's defense counsel has even responded to the indictment. Everyone knows the normal process is the government indicts, the defense responds with some motions, and then the government responds to the defense. But Mr. Smith skips the second step. And the brief that he files is 165 pages, almost 4 times the court limit. Even liberal Judge Chutkan, who's given Jack Smith everything he's asked for in the course of this investigation, even she called it atypical and irregular. Now, why would Jack Smith do that? Why would he abandon proper procedure Why would he ignore court rules? Why would he do that? Because he's running out of time. There's an election around the corner. It's coming in 33 days, and he's got to get President Trump. He's got to stop President Trump from running, tie him up in court. He's got to get to trial, or at a minimum, insert an 165-page political document into the presidential campaign. It was always about politics. The good news is the American people saw through it. They saw through it. For so long, the left has controlled so much in this country. The left controlled big media, the left controlled big tech, the left controlled academia, Hollywood, certainly the Democrat Party, and I think all too much the federal bureaucracy. But the left doesn't control we the people. And in spite of the left and the weaponization efforts of Jim Comey, Alvin Bragg, Fonnie Willis, and Jack Smith, we the people saw through it all. And we elected President Trump twice. Before turning to the ranking member for his opening statement, I would just ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the Washington Post editorial, Jack Smith would have blown a hole in the First Amendment. And with that, I yield to the gentleman from Maryland.
Well, thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. I want to start by recognizing the presence of 4 American heroes here today, 4 of the hundreds of officers who defended us on January 6, 2021, Michael Fanone, Aquilina Gonell, Daniel Hodges, and Harry Dunn. And I thank them for being here today. Mr. Smith, thank you for appearing before the American people. I'm glad that the committee has finally granted you the same chance to report your findings to the American people that every other special counsel investigating an American president has had. The good chairman started by saying, it's all about the politics. Well, maybe for them, but for us, it's all about the rule of law and who's going to stand by the rule of law and who's going to oppose it. Now, Mr. Smith, you're one of America's great prosecutors. For nearly 3 decades, you worked for justice under both Republicans and Democrats. The Manhattan DA office, where you prosecuted sex crimes and domestic violence cases. The Eastern District of New York, where you prosecuted murderers, rapists, gangbangers, and other violent criminals. Leading the public integrity section at the Department of Justice, you brought prosecutions against corrupt public officials across the political spectrum. When you went to The Hague as chief prosecutor in the Kosovo trial, you prosecuted war crimes and crimes against humanity perpetrated against thousands of innocent victims. While others may have devoted their lives to corrupt self-enrichment, you have devoted your life to the rule of law and to public service. You've never been prosecuted for anything. You've never been convicted of anything. As far as I can tell, you've never even been the subject of a disciplinary proceeding over the course of your multi-decade career. But Donald Trump says you're a criminal and you belong in prison. He says you belong in prison, not because you did anything wrong, mind you, but because you did everything right. You pursued the facts, you followed the law, you stuck with extreme caution to every rule of professional responsibility. You had the audacity to do your job. Everybody here knows what you did wrong in Donald Trump's eyes and why he says you belong in prison. You found, and I quote from your sworn testimony before the committee, you found proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 election and to prevent the lawful transfer of power. When asked whether you believe the evidence was enough to obtain a criminal conviction against Donald Trump at trial, you had a one-word answer: yes. When asked if Donald Trump was responsible for the violence that took place at the Capitol on January 6th, you said, our view of the evidence was that he caused it and that he exploited it and that it was foreseeable to him. You found that Trump knew he had lost the election. How? Well, his own Attorney General, William Barr, repeatedly told him so and described all of Trump's theories as BS. Trump's top campaign advisors told him he lost the election. Vice President Pence told him he lost the election. More than 60 federal, state, and court decisions, including 8 rendered by judges he appointed to the bench, rejected every outlandish election fraud and corruption claim that he made. Trump himself even privately acknowledged it, gesturing to Joe Biden on TV and saying, quote, "Can you believe I lost to that effing guy?" He knew he lost, but he threw everything into his big lie, which some people, even in this room to this day, will stand by and swear by. Well, when the big lie wasn't enough to convince officials like Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, a Republican, to commit election fraud and just fine Trump 11,780 votes, when it wasn't enough to convince Trump's DOJ to, quote, "just call the election corrupt and leave the rest to me and the House Republicans," when it wasn't enough to force Vice President Mike Pence to announce and then exercise lawless powers to reject Electoral College votes and use counterfeit slates to anoint Trump the winner, that's when Trump incited mass violence on January 6th. While more than 140 officers were being brutally assaulted by Trump's mob, while rioters beat them with flagpoles and sprayed them with chemical agents and crushed them in doorways, and while they chanted, "Hang Mike Pence," and chased the vice president out of the Capitol, Trump and his team worked the phones, calling not the National Guard, which was under the direct unilateral control of Donald Trump, but calling members of Congress, urging them to delay certification and to nullify the election results. Special Counsel Smith, you pursued the facts. You followed every applicable law, ethics rule, and DOJ regulation. Your decisions were reviewed by the Public Integrity Section. You acted based solely on the facts, the opposite of Donald Trump, who now has purported to take over the Department of Justice. He's in charge of the whole thing under his unitary executive theory, and he acts openly, purely based on political vendetta and motives of personal revenge, and he doesn't deny it. Our colleagues have complained about the special counsel's review of toll records, which are phone records like a phone bill, showing only the timing and duration of calls and containing no content, no substance whatsoever from the calls. But those records were lawfully subpoenaed because Donald Trump made those members of Congress relevant to the investigation. It was Trump who chose to call them to advance his criminal scheme. As you testified, Mr. Smith, if Donald Trump had chosen to call a number of Democratic senators, we would have gotten toll records for them too. I trust our colleagues get the point because America certainly gets the point. There is much Mr. Smith still can't talk about, though we know he badly wants to. His investigation developed what he calls powerful evidence that Trump stole documents containing our country's most sensitive secrets, hoarded them in the ballrooms and the bathrooms of his well-trafficked Mar-a-Lago social club. He showed them off to visitors, and then he obstructed a federal investigation by instructing his attorney to pluck out anything really bad before turning materials over to the FBI and having his staff delete incriminating security tape footage. But today, we're not going to hear a lot about that because you are gagged by an absurd judicial order rendered faithfully by Trump's most servile and sycophantic appointee to the federal bench, Judge Eileen Cannon. This order not only blocks release of Volume 2 of your report, which is unprecedented, about the classified document scam, it also gags you from discussing the report or its contents with us, with America. And so we don't know what's in it, but it must be pretty devastating because Donald Trump is desperate to keep Mr. Smith or any other DOJ official for all time from ever releasing it to Congress and to the American people. Now, Mr. Smith, if any of our colleagues foolishly choose to attack you and vilify you today, and I know that's not going to happen from some serious prosecutors over there like Mr. Knott and Mr. Schmidt, who understand what federal prosecutors do and what the rule of law means. But if anybody decides to attack you personally, they will only be revealing their own ignorance of what prosecutors do and their own indifference to what the rule of law requires in America. They will only be stroking the wounded ego of a lawless, twice impeached convicted felon president who not only unleashed a mob against Congress and his own vice president, but has now pardoned and released into our communities hundreds of extremists, insurrectionists, and cop-beating felons who have proceeded to commit dozens more crimes against the American people since they were pardoned. Mr. Smith, I understand you are a long-distance marathon runner. I read that you're a triathlete who's done more than 100 triathlons and 9 Ironman competitions. You are in the fight for justice and the rule of law for the long distance, for the long haul, and I thank you for that. And we should all try to follow your example. America looks forward to your testimony today. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back without objection. All of their opening statements will be included in the record. We will now introduce today's witness. Mr. Jack Smith was appointed as special counsel on November 18th, 2022. He served until January 7th, 2025. We welcome our witness today. We'll begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God?
I do.
Let the record reflect that the witness has answered in the affirmative. Thank you. You can be seated. Please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony. Mr. Smith, you may begin.
Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Raskin, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss my work as special counsel. I love my country and believe deeply in the core principles upon which it was founded. For nearly 3 decades, I've served as a career prosecutor in both Republican and Democratic administrations. I've handled cases ranging from domestic assault and gang violence to public corruption and election crimes across the United States, and I've prosecuted war crimes overseas. I am not a politician, and I have no partisan loyalties. My career has been dedicated to serving our country by upholding the rule of law. Throughout my public service, my approach has always been the same: follow the facts and the law without fear or favor. Experienced prosecutors know that specific case outcomes are beyond our control. Our responsibility is to do the right thing, the right way, for the right reasons. These principles have guided me through my career, including as special counsel. I'm proud of the work my team did, and I appreciate the opportunity to appear here today to correct false and misleading narratives about our work. During my tenure as special counsel, we followed Justice Department policies, we observed legal requirements, and took actions based on the facts and the law. I made my decisions without regard to President Trump's political association, activities, beliefs, or candidacy in the 2024 election. President Trump was charged because the evidence established that he willfully broke the law, the very laws he took an oath to uphold. Grand juries in 2 separate districts reached this conclusion based on his actions, as alleged in the indictments they returned. Rather than accept his defeat in the 2020 election, President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results and prevent the lawful transfer of power. After leaving office in January of 21, President Trump illegally kept classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago social club and repeatedly tried to obstruct justice to conceal his continued retention of those documents. Highly sensitive national security information was held in a ballroom and a bathroom. As I testify before the committee today, I want to be clear. I stand by my decisions as special counsel, including the decision to bring charges against President Trump. Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in criminal activity. If asked whether to prosecute a former president based on the same facts today, I would do so regardless of whether that president was a Democrat or a Republican. No one should be above the law in this country, and the law required that he be held to account, so that is what I did. To have done otherwise on the facts of these cases would have been to shirk my duties as a prosecutor and as a public servant, of which I had no intention of doing. I remain grateful for the counsel, judgment, and advice of my team. President Trump has sought to seek revenge against career prosecutors, FBI agents, and support staff simply for having worked on these cases. To vilify and seek retribution against these people is wrong. Those dedicated public servants are the best of us, and it has been a privilege to serve with them. After nearly 30 years of public service, including in international settings, I have seen how the rule of law can erode. My fear is that we have seen the rule of law function in our country for so long that many of us have come to take it for granted. The rule of law is not self-executing. It depends on our collective commitment to apply it. It requires dedicated service on behalf of others, especially when that service is difficult and comes with costs. Our willingness to pay those costs is what tests and defines our commitment to the rule of law and to this wonderful country. Thank you.
Gentlemen, we will now proceed under the 5-minute rule. We have votes coming in any minute now, but I think we'll have time for 3 or 4 members to get their 5-minute questions in before the committee will take a recess to go vote. They are not going to close the vote until we get there. I know that much. So we will start with the gentleman from California. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Smith. When Attorney General Garland appointed you, he cited the particularly sensitive matters at issue and extraordinary circumstances as the reason for appointing a special counsel. What did you take that to mean?
What I understood that to mean is I was to conduct an independent investigation and come to my own conclusions about whether the facts and the law supported a prosecution.
But clearly he was alluding to the fact that we had an investigation into a leading candidate for president. That was part of the extraordinary circumstances. Would you agree?
I will rely on his public statements about that. I understood my role as special counsel was governed by the regulations, which required me to make an independent decision on my own.
So certainly you would agree it was important to approach the investigation with humility and restraint. Is that fair?
Yes, and that's what I sought to do. I sought to
And you thought you possessed those qualities. In fact, you testified at your deposition, quote, "I thought I was the right person for the job." Of course, some disagreed. Constitutional law professor Jonathan Turley, for example, has said, quote, "Jack Smith has a reputation for stretching criminal statutes beyond the breaking point." I assume you disagree with that statement by Professor Turley.
I do disagree with that statement. I think my career speaks for itself. I have been
But that statement was also, and I'm sorry to have to interrupt, I just have a short amount of time. That statement was also echoed by the United States Supreme Court in a unanimous opinion in McDonald versus the United States, where the court overturned convictions that you had pursued against a former governor, criticizing your boundless interpretation of the federal criminal statute. At issue, that opinion was joined by Justices Ginsburg, Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan. So do you also disagree with that statement by those justices?
I have conducted my career in a nonpartisan fashion. That particular case, the legal position that the department took, that wasn't my personal position. That was the position of the department.
I see. So, Mr. Smith, I've had the opportunity during my time on this committee to review the work of 2 special counsels, John Durham, appointed during the Trump administration, and Robert Hur during the Biden administration. And in both cases, they seem to exhibit that humility and restraint that we talked about. But in reviewing in detail the way you conducted this investigation, I see a very different mode of operation. One that sought maximum litigation advantage at every turn, one that repeatedly circumvented constitutional limitations to the point that you had to be reined in again and again throughout the process. For example, shortly after you became special counsel, you issued a subpoena for the phone records of the Speaker of the House of Representatives over a 2-month period, along with for other senators and representatives, even though the public integrity section at DOJ cited litigation risk to doing this. What was that litigation risk?
With respect to the toll record subpoenas that we issued, they were approved by the Public Integrity Section. The Public Integrity Section, in approving those subpoenas, noted the fact that the subpoenas were for records for people who were not targets of our investigation.
But they said there was a litigation risk and you moved forward with it anyway. And not only that, but you also sought orders from judges making it so those who were having their records seized would not know about it. And you even didn't tell those judges that it was members of Congress whose records you were going after, in apparent contravention of a federal statute saying that a telephone provider for a Senate office shall not be barred from providing notice that the records had been requested. Now, if you sought to do that today, would you be able to get away with that, with asking the judges for a non-disclosure order without telling them these are members of Congress?
When we secured these toll record subpoenas, it was done consistent with department policy. You're correct in that that policy has since changed.
They changed the policy based upon the actions that you took. Similarly, you issued a gag order against President Trump that the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals vacated as overbroad. Is that correct?
Well, the D.C. Court of Appeals, in passing on that order, found that it was justified. They narrowed the order, but they confirmed that the phenomenon—
They narrowed the order because it was overbroad. In addition to that, you sought an early trial date that the district court rejected, and when you presented your prosecution memo to Attorney General Garland, it's been reported that he was visibly unimpressed and expressed First Amendment concerns. So, Mr. Smith, looking at the record, I see that you were reversed and rebuked by the Department of Justice itself, by the Attorney General, by the Solicitor General, by multiple district court judges, by the Court of Appeals, and by the U.S. Supreme Court itself. So my final question is, do you believe that you made any mistakes? Do you have any regrets as to how you conducted this investigation?
If I have any regret, it would be not expressing enough appreciation for my staff who work so hard in these investigations. We followed the facts and the law. These people who work for me sacrificed endlessly and have endured way too much for just doing their job. So if anything, I wish that I had thanked them.
Time of the gentleman.
No mistakes. There's that humility. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Yeah, the time of the gentleman's right. The chair now recognizes the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the good gentleman from California certainly knows, because he was a student of mine, that lawyers go to court and sometimes they win motions and sometimes they lose motions, and there's no crime in any of that. And I'm just sorry that you had to be lectured about humility and restraint by a politician, because we might not be best poised to lecture you on those particular virtues. But let's go to the toll record, since that's been raised, Mr. Smith. First of all, Congress has allowed toll records to be subpoenaed. This committee has actually tried to limit it over the years, and the senators who are whining the most over on the Republican side in the Senate, they never went along with our determination to try to limit the government's ability to subpoena toll records. So it's perfectly lawful what you did. Explain, why did you want those toll records?
We wanted to conduct a thorough investigation of the matters that was assigned to me, including attempts to interfere with the lawful transfer of power. The conspiracy that we were investigating, it was relevant to get toll records to understand the scope of that conspiracy, who they were seeking to coerce, who they were seeking to influence, who was seeking to help them.
And that's normal investigative practice, right?
In conducting a criminal investigation, securing non-content toll records, as you described, is a common practice in almost any complex conspiracy.
Okay, let's go to something else that I've been hearing over the last week by our colleagues as they've eagerly anticipated your arrival here. They've been saying that there's some kind of First Amendment defense that Donald Trump would have had to the crimes you indicted him for. Is there a valid First Amendment defense to defrauding the public? Is there a valid First Amendment defense to disrupting a federal proceeding? Is there a valid First Amendment defense to violating the voting rights of the people and cheating the public out of a fair election?
The First Amendment is something that we took seriously in our investigation, but the First Amendment does not protect speech that facilitates a crime. Speech that is used to facilitate a crime, a fraud crime in particular, is not protected under the First Amendment. The Supreme Court precedent on that is clear. This is an issue that we litigated before the district court, and the district court ruled, as I just stated, that it is not in fact protected.
And the case law is perfectly clear on this, right? All frauds are perpetrated by speech, right?
Yes.
All conspiracies are perpetrated by speech. So just because your criminal conduct is brigaded with speech doesn't somehow mean you've got a First Amendment defense against trying to overthrow the government. I mean, the people who attacked the police officers on January 6th were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." I suppose that was political speech, or they were saying, "Stop the steal." Does that mean they've got a First Amendment defense to violent assault against the officers?
It does not.
William Barr, by the way, was somebody who was perfectly clear about that. Donald Trump's own attorney general said, there's no freedom of speech that you have to engage in a conspiracy, to overthrow an election, to commit crime. He was perfectly clear about that. Back in those days, in fact, lots of people on that side of the aisle, including my good friend, the chairman, denounced the violence that took place on January 6th. The cat's got their tongue these days. My friend Chairman Jordan said, what happened last week was terrible, was tragic. It's as wrong can be, he said. Republicans, we know all political violence is wrong. I asked my friend Chairman Jordan at a rules hearing, are you also not interested in what happened to us on January 6th? He said, of course, everyone's interested in holding people accountable who did wrong. The FBI is doing that. The Justice Department is doing that, appropriately so. What do you think about the attack on the Department of Justice and the special counsel for doing your jobs?
I think the attack is unjustified. I think the people who worked with me as career public servants are people, they're part of the reason I've been a prosecutor for so long is to work with people like that, not just the prosecutors in my office, but also the agents, FBI agents who are heroes, who have served their country not only as agents, but also overseas. I think those attacks are unwarranted based on the facts, and I think that they have no basis in who we are as Americans, as a country. I don't see attacking people like that as anything appropriate.
Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back to you.
The gentleman yields back. Mr. Smith, is Cassidy Hutchinson a liar? She was their star witness. January 6th committee, their star witness in one of those staged and choreographed hearings they paid the former president of ABC News to put together. She was, in fact, the only witness at this special primetime hearing, Tuesday, June 28th, 2022, 8 o'clock in the evening, and she told some stories. I mean, these were some stories. She talked about President lunged across the back seat, grabbed the steering wheel, tried to drive the car to the Capitol. And I just want to know, you think she was lying?
Chairman Jordan, my assessment of that particular issue is that with respect to the testimony about the president lunging towards the driver, my recollection of her testimony about that is that it was secondhand. She had said she'd heard that from somebody.
You familiar with the name Tony Ornato?
I'm sorry,
You
sir?
familiar with the name Tony Ornato?
Yes.
White House Deputy Chief of Operations, Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, right? You remember what he said about it?
As I sit here right now, I do not.
Yeah, he said it didn't happen. How about Bobby Engel? You familiar with that name?
Yes, I am.
Secret Service agent who was actually in the car that day. You know what he said? He said it didn't happen. And they both said the first time they ever heard this story was when Ms. Hutchinson testified in the primetime hearing as their star witness of the January 6th committee. By the way, did you ever confirm her testimony about this particular incident?
We conducted, as I said before, our own independent investigation of all aspects of the case that we thought was relevant. We, attorneys from my office,
Did you ever confirm it? That's a simple question.
we interviewed, or I should say attorneys in my office before.
Did you ever confirm the president leaping across the seat, grabbing the steering wheel, this whole concoction she brought up in the January 6th hearing? Did you ever confirm that?
Right. We interviewed another firsthand witness who was in the car, who did not confirm that
Okay.
had happened, but also
In your deposition
stated
to the
that-
committee last month, Mr. Smith, you said this: my recollection with Ms. Hutchinson was a number of the things that she gave evidence on were secondhand hearsay. You remember us making that statement to us last month in the deposition?
I did, and I was referring particularly to what we're talking about now.
Yeah, and you also said Ms. Hutchinson, regarding this particular claim, was a second or even third-hand witness. We asked you, if you were a defense attorney, how would you handle cross-examining her if she was on the witness stand? And you said, if I were a defense attorney and Ms. Hutchinson were a witness, the first thing I would do was seek to preclude her testimony because it was hearsay. You remember saying all that?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
That's correct, right? Were you going to put her on the witness stand if you ever got to trial?
We had not made final determinations as to who we were going to call as a witness. We had a
You were
large,
still considering her?
we had a large choice of witnesses in this
Are
case.
you familiar what Washington Post reporters Carol Leonnig and Aaron Davis said in their book? They did this book, 300-some pages book on chronicling the whole investigation of the Justice Department. And here's what they said on page 310. They said, Jack Smith had wondered whether some of Hutchinson's claims might be relied upon at trial. Still, at one point, Smith told the elections team he wasn't ready to give up on Hutchinson's account. Ultimately, however, Trump administration officials uniformly, fiercely disputed her accounts under oath. Prosecutors on your team told Smith they wouldn't want to use Hutchinson as a witness in court, and Smith agreed. Are Carol Leonnig and Aaron Davis, who wrote this, are they lying?
My recollection is that I certainly had not made any final determinations about who we were going to call.
And
as a
that's the point. That is the point. The fact that they used her in a primetime hearing and you won't rule out using her, or didn't rule out using her, putting her on the witness stand when everybody knows she wasn't telling the truth, that says it all. That's the degree the left and Democrats were willing to go to get President Trump, putting on the witness stand someone everybody knows is making it up. Everybody knows that. And you were willing to do it. By the way, you know how many times Cassidy Hutchinson was mentioned in their report, the January 6th report? Any idea, Mr. Smith?
I do not.
185 times. Someone that the whole country knows wasn't telling the truth, and you were still considering putting her on the witness stand because you had to get President Trump. And everybody can see that. We better take a recess for votes. We will resume as soon as votes are over. Back here 10 minutes after. Mrs. Smith, you guys can go back to the room that you were in.
The most important thing that happened here this morning was Jim Jordan's opening statement, because lost in all of the details of his recitation of how Trump got investigated was a simple statement that he made twice, where he said the American people had elected Donald Trump twice. And that's got to be news to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump, in his long-ranging interview with the New York Times very recently said, and I'm going to quote from the article, "I shouldn't complain. I won 3 times. I mean, I won 3 times. I did great the second time, and I didn't get credited with that." So I thought it would be interesting to know what Donald Trump is thinking right now, to the extent he's watching this. Does he agree with Jim Jordan's statement that he was elected only twice by the American people? That seems like a big disjuncture to me between the Trump world and even what we're hearing from the Republican chairman of the House Judiciary Committee.
This is, Timothy, I think, a very fascinating confluence of the legal and the political, right? There are a lot of lawyers on this committee, and we heard it, for example, from the Republican from California who sounded like a prosecutor, like he once was. But let me ask you about this. My understanding is, if we take it in its simplest form, these indictments against Donald Trump was he responsible for a criminal scheme to overturn the 2020 election? And did he store classified documents that should not have been there, obviously, at Mar-a-Lago? So help people to understand why so much of this conversation was about phone records and Cassidy Hutchinson, who my understanding is not even named in the indictment.
Because the disconnect is intentional. Because the evidence against Donald Trump as it relates to both those cases is incredibly strong. They were laid out in extensive indictments that are in the public record, starting first with January 6th. You can look both at what the subcommittee did, but also this long speaking indictment where it lays out the facts as to what happened. The reason they're talking about Cassidy Hutchinson is because they intentionally want the sideshow, in my view. The evidence here was truly a product of an extensive, thoughtful, cautious investigation, aggressive but still cautious. And I think
can you be both?
You can be both, because you can see prosecutors who can overcharge. You can see prosecutors who are aggressive and show no restraint. What he did, though, was follow the law. He charged a case that was strong, but you didn't see him charge, for example, the Fonnie Willis case, where he put in 12 or 24 individuals. You didn't see a 30-count indictment where he sought to overload. He charged 4 counts. He charged this president by himself, and what he did was lay out all his facts in a thoughtful way. And a lot of the complaints they have here are about the fact that he was prosecuted, Donald Trump. They're not charging the substance. They're not saying that the evidence wasn't there. I saw no engagement with the facts as put forward by Jack Smith, which to me actually shows you how strong the case is. If they had an ability to challenge the substance, they would. And because they have not challenged it, it's because it's strong.
That is interesting, because that's why I have said, as we're all watching, this is hard to follow because it isn't related specific to his investigation. It's more of sort of the noise around the investigation. Claire, what do you make of the tone we've heard from lawmakers so far?
Well, this is a mismatch, because you've got somebody who has very calm demeanor, very staid. I would disagree. I think he seems like a pretty humble guy to me. I mean, he's never been out there throwing sharp elbows for TV cameras in this entire time he's been involved in this. And you compare and contrast that with the highly combative theater that's going on. And what these Republican members are going to try to do is they're going to try to raise some money today. They're all going to try to have the clip that gets used on their outlets so they can then regurgitate that back to an email base and social media base that gives them money for their campaigns, that makes them seem like they're the strongest pro-Trump Republican congressman ever to exist. So their goal is to stand out in theater. His goal is to calmly give them the facts. And they're going to do everything in their power not to let him do that, because the facts are devastating to Donald Trump.
But do you think his calm demeanor breaks through?
I don't think it does. I mean, honestly, I think, one of the problems he's going to have is he thinks he can do it the way Jack Smith's always done it, calmly, with evidence. I mean, if you're a good prosecutor, you let the witnesses and evidence speak. You may argue in closing argument and try to do it in a compelling way, but a good prosecutor is not the star of the show. The evidence is the star of the show. And they're not going to let him do that here. So if he doesn't amp it up a little bit, if he doesn't ask, for example, Jordan, let me finish my answer, please. He should have let him. He wanted to say, you could tell he wanted to say something that was important, and Jordan just cut him off. He's going to have to do that a little bit, or the only time we're going to really hear anything that's relevant to this is from when the Democratic members, and I'm worried the Democratic members are now going to try to do theater and not going to give him a chance to, in fact, lay out what he learned in his very thorough and fair investigation.
Yeah, I think there could be a strategic mistake there, and we've seen it in some other hearings where the members of Congress talk 10 times more than the people who are supposedly there informing us. But I'm very curious, Jackie, what you think about this, because in that vein, how much of this, besides obviously the fundraising and playing to their base, will be the Republicans and has been the Republicans channeling Donald Trump, and we know how he feels about Jack Smith?
I think that's the bulk of what we're ultimately going to see today. I spoke with someone yesterday for quite some time who was involved with the planning of this hearing, was involved with Jack Smith's initial transcribed deposition, who acknowledged that there are plenty of people in the Republican Party who think this is a terrible idea to relitigate January 6th, that Jack Smith is whip smart, he's going to wipe the floor, and that January 6th was objectively not a good day for the Republican Party. But what members on the Republican side of the committee did agree on is that there is still a very strong, very powerful faction that includes the president that hates Jack Smith and have their own conspiratorial views on what happened on January 6th, and they want to see some blood. They want to see some accountability, and that is why the decision was ultimately made against some people's reticence here to bring him forward. But the president, as this person said to me, he hates Jack Smith. He thinks he tried to ruin him and his friends' lives. And so I think a lot of the commentary you're going to see and the lines of questionings from Republicans today is going to be directly pointed towards Trump. The other aspect of this that I do want to comment on, the Cassidy Hutchinson of it all, I was also told to expect some more pointed commentary about her.
Why are they focusing on her?
She's someone in her capacity working for Mark Meadows was essentially the conduit between the White House and Congress. She developed a ton of relationships. She had a lot of friends, people who thought they were genuinely friends with her, and they felt betrayed by her decision to go to the January 6th committee and also felt like she wasn't being truthful. And I will note, and Temi, not to put you on the spot here, but at the time when we were covering this, there was a lot of debate internally on the January 6th committee about whether or not Cassidy was a viable witness, that whether the committee would be doing themselves a favor bringing forward someone who was a secondhand witness who, as Jack Smith said in his initial transcribed deposition, that her testimony may or may not be admissible, that it wouldn't be as powerful as firsthand testimony, and did say that it did call it at one point that she gave evidence that could be secondhand hearsay.
Lisa, of course, you, I know, had a chance to kind of review some of the transcripts from his 8-hour deposition. It ended up being 250 plus pages that was released on, I think it was New Year's Eve. So perhaps our viewers are less acquainted with it. How does this testimony and the questions and answering that we've seen so far compare to that deposition?
Jack Smith hasn't done a lot of talking yet.
Yeah.
You know, we're doing a lot of talking about him, but aside from his opening statement, he really hasn't been given much of an opportunity to describe his decision making. I would say that that deposition was much more focused on what the investigation was about. This seems like a much greater free-for-all. I mean, in part, that's because the deposition, while many members were there, was also conducted by professional staff. So it's not surprising to me when you contrast, for example, the January 6th hearings on one hand with, for example, the depositions that people gave, and you look at those transcripts. The transcripts are oftentimes more informative than the hearings themselves because of who's asking the questions.
Right.
And so I don't know that we're comparing apples and oranges in that way, Anna.
Who's taking the bigger risk here politically? Which side? I think there's so much going on, Claire, and people are so exhausted to even bring back January 6th, to bring back names like Cassidy Hutchinson, to in some ways relitigate is to go back to another stressful time. Having said that, how important is this, and is either side taking the bigger risk?
I think both sides, there's a risk to both sides. I think if Jack Smith, in the rest of the hearing, has an opportunity to amp up a little bit and to hold his ground and to show some emotion, that, I mean, I thought his answer that his regret was that he wasn't grateful enough for his staff was a good answer. But he needs to not just say, I followed the facts and the law over and over again. He's going to have to. I was frankly surprised he didn't go through some of the evidence in his opening statement. He could have.
And we expected him to.
I thought it would have been a little bit more of a robust opening statement in terms of laying out the damning evidence that is factual that he uncovered, that he could, based on the gag orders and so forth. So there's a risk that, I don't know if you guys remember Mueller's testimony, but Mueller's testimony was not great.
No.
Right? He needs to really show the American people that are paying attention to this what he found and why it was such a nonpartisan effort he made. I do think the Republicans letting this take center stage, it's not helping anybody's grocery bills. It's certainly not helping their health insurance. It's not doing the kinds of things that Trump said he would do. It really kind of underscores that they're more interested in, trying to blame Hillary Clinton for Epstein sex trafficking and trying to blame Jack Smith for stuff than they are really helping the American people.
Guys, we're going to squeeze in a quick break as we wait for the testimony to resume with Special Counsel Jack Smith. We're going to just be back with more of our special coverage in a couple moments, so stay right there.
There you go. Now you can hear me. I apologize for that, everybody. This is an interesting hearing we're watching today, of course, unfold. We're watching Jack Smith being grilled so far by Republican congressmen mostly. And the theme seems to be let's lump everything about January 6th together and blame Jack Smith for it. That certainly feels where we are right now. But this is still early going. I'm glad he's getting a break right now. I'm sure it's going to be very useful for him because he might want to regroup a little bit. This is different from the first hearing he had, which you'll recall was quite unique. He provided testimony none of us had heard before about why he believed the president of the United States was complicit in all these dealings. And now we're seeing some more of this going on now. So we're going to keep watching this hearing. I'll take your comments as you wander through here. We're also maybe going to be joined by Lev Parnas. So and then when they get back to the table, we'll pull back and show you exactly what's going on inside the hearing. Let's take a look at some of what you guys are saying online now, because there is a lot of interesting commentary by everybody here. I'm just going to quickly see if I can actually show you what people are saying at the same time. I'm not sure I can. But let me go to full screen in the meantime to explain what I'm seeing here. So Blonde Legally is saying, and I'm just going to pick these up as they show up here. I love Harry. It's scrolling so fast I can't read them all. I'm out of state in Utah and have to listen to this on Fox News. It is really a right-wing hate-spewing station. Ivy Rose writes, Jack Smith is authentic and his demeanor is true. And this is a theater to destroy his work. And now let me find out if I can get Lev on here, because I think Lev is joining us. Again, this is not always too easy for me, but let me see if I can play all these buttons and press all the right things and get Lev Parnas to join us as well. There is Lev. Now you can hear me. I think if I do it this way, you're going to be able to hear me. Now you can hear me, but I can't hear you. Why can't I hear you? Let's figure this out. Okay. Now I got you.
You got me?
Yeah, you got me, I think.
All
Can you hear
right.
me?
I got you.
Whew, this is complicated, the setup I got here. But I'll figure it out. It does great things along the way. Lev, we've been watching the testimony. I'm not sure if they're getting back in there, but what's your sense so far as you're watching this? It certainly seems like they're coming after Jack Smith pretty hard on things that he doesn't even know about, or doesn't directly know about.
Well, I'll tell you, it is definitely interesting. I expected Jack Smith to come out more aggressive. I definitely he sounds a little, he looks a little bit, very calculated in his answers. He's taking his time, which I guess that's good. But it looks a little timid. It looks like he's not, especially when it came to the Katie Hutchinson situation. I think he needs to be more assertive. I think he needs to stop allowing them to corner him and stick to the facts, because that's what, and I know Jordan very well from personally. I personally know Jordan, so I could tell you, he's not a practicing lawyer, but he's a pit bull. That's why they have him. He's really good at taking and misconstruing and taking, like, making a mountain out of a molehill. He specializes in that. And that's why my advice to, if they would have asked me prior to, because I testified in front of that committee, in front of Jordan there also, I know them very well, and you guys stick to the facts. Jordan isn't asked. Jordan is what's it called? But don't let them go away. And I would recommend that the Democrats stick to the facts. The facts are what they are, and don't let them try to go off into these tangents, because that's what the Republicans are going to try to do. They got like these little things, and they're gonna, and I would have answered it, yes, that the testimony didn't pan out the way it was, and we wouldn't have used it, and we were moving on, and let's move on. What's the next one? But the fact that he's that's exactly what Jordan's trying to do.
Yeah, they're trying to conflate as well these different investigations. I mean, the one thing is done by the congressional committee that investigated January 6th, different investigation than the one he was involved in. He might have known the same witnesses, he might have interviewed the same witnesses, but to conflate these events together is really unfair to the audience, but it is intended. I mean, this is exactly what they're trying to do, is muddy the waters around this. And, if Donald Trump didn't reach over and grab the steering wheel, therefore the whole thing is tainted, is just not true.
But you're 100% right, and that's their whole. That's the Jim Jordan. That's what you're going to see today.
Yeah.
You're going to see them find these little holes, as whatever you want to call them. Zev, Ellie said if you want to re-invite, she's home.
Yeah, I just sent her an invite right now.
Send Ellie, send Ellie an invite.
I just sent it to her, so she should be able to get it.
Perfect. I guess, folks. First of all, I guess we're going to be going throughout the day today. We don't know how long these testimonies the testimony is going to be going on for, but we're going to live stream it live, right, Zev? We're going to stream.
Yeah, I'm going to stay up as long as we can.
Yeah, and we'll stay up, and we'll come back on as they take breaks, and we'll discuss it, because there's also other breaking news, other stuff happening that we need to keep you informed of, especially overseas. Right now, Trump is meeting with Zelensky. Simultaneously, you have Witkoff and Kushner going to Moscow. There's a major power play taking place there, and I'm hearing things from the inside Greenland and NATO. It's all intertwined, no coincidence. We're going to break some stuff later on today, Zev, about that, what's happening there. And also, obviously, we're going to, keep the focus on also during out the day on the Epstein files, what's going on, the latest, what Michael Cohen. And we have over a couple of thousand people here, folks. I want to ask you quickly before we continue. We have a petition right now going out there that we're signing. We have almost 2,000 votes. Incredible. We just launched it yesterday. We need to get, I want to see 1 million votes. I want to go to Congress with that petition. That petition is very simple. What it demands is it demands that while we're waiting for more files to be released, while we're waiting for all of this, we want to make sure that right now we know certain people already have been named in the Epstein files and have information. Those three individuals are Michael Cohen, Michael Wolff, and Steve Bannon. Those three people, that is simple what the petition is, folks. And we need as many names. So I ask each and every one of you, this is what action is, and this is what our voices are. Because when I go sit down in Congress with that petition, the more voices, that's when we make our voices heard. Just like when we email, when we call, but this is it where we sign. And so please, if you can, put it in the chat, spread it around. We're gonna edit. Ellie, what's up? I just wanted to make sure that I got that out there. And
Thank you for
Zev,
doing
if you
that.
can, if you could put it out there on your
You know,
social, I'll send it
I
to
always have a
you.
rule not to sign any petitions just because of my. I try to be as objective as I can in my
Well, then
reporting,
you
but I
well
will absolutely share the link because I think it's
share
important
it.
that everyone
Yes, yes,
make their
please
own
share it.
decision about
Yes.
this. Yeah.
Exactly. And Ellie, also, if you can, we got a petition out there that I was just saying it about. I don't know if I sent it to you. If you could share with all your subscribers, it's a simple petition basically asking Congress to be able to, while we're waiting for more files to be released, and to immediately subpoena three individuals, Michael Wolff, Michael Cohen, and Steve Bannon, to put their testimony under oath while we're waiting for more releases. So if you could share with your community, with your people, we need to get as many signatures as possible.
Ellie, you've been
I'll
watching the
stop right
coverage.
there.
What did you think of the hearing so far? Oh wait, I can't hear you. Hang on. Let me fix this. Do. There you go. And now I can hear you. I think. Say something. No, it's still not. Oh, I will figure this out. This is more. It's way more complicated than anything I've worked on before. So give me 1 second here. Let me make sure that
I'll
it's.
start
There you
signing.
are.
Oh,
There
there
you
you are.
are. I
We
You hear
got
found
me?
you.
Ellie. We got
You got me?
I
Ellie.
Okay.
found you.
No, I need you to fill me in because I had another interview this morning and then I had a doctor appointment. So I
Oh.
am behind. I'm going to go
I mean, it's
listen
as
in.
you'd expect. The Republicans are really going after Jack Smith. This is not the first, like the first hearing, which he really had a lot more latitude to discuss things and was able to testify more freely. That was the one that was held in camera, but then released publicly around Christmas Day. Now we're seeing
Yeah.
him being grilled in a public theater. You know, this is about the Republicans trying to score points against him, and so far they're getting more points than the other side. But of course, the tables are going to turn. These hearings are lengthy, and every time one side is going to try to score points, and then the other side is going to try to score points. That's not what we really want. I mean, obviously, we want to discover something really useful here, but we're not necessarily going to get that. We're going to get a lot of back and forth of theater here to see who wins the day. At the end of the day, that's what they're trying to do, is to see who wins the day. That's all that matters to them. The truth doesn't matter. It's all about who can win in front of Fox News tonight, who can win in front of MSNBC tonight. So, you know, that I have limited hope, but he's doing okay so far. He hasn't had much time to speak, I will say. Lev, I don't know
Okay.
if you want to add
I'm going to
anything to
be.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was gonna say it just started, Ellie. So they just actually went
Okay.
into a vote. So they only had a few questions. So far, my evaluation is Jack Smith came out a little bit slow out of the gate. He's a little timid, a little, but they are asking him certain questions. But again, some people say it's a boxing match. I agree with you. We have many rounds to go. This is only the beginning, first round. I do expect Jack Smith to start coming out and as they start proceeding with some amazing factual content, why he believed and why he was ready to prosecute and why he thought Trump. So I truly believe it will get better. I think it's just starting. There was only a few questions. I also think the Democrats should do less, grandstanding and let Jack Smith do more, produce more of the evidence and facts and put it in the record and let the people see it instead of spending their 5 minutes of speeches. Because the Republicans, I know them very well, especially Jordan, like I said, he's a pit bull. He's a professional at trying to antagonize and trying to, manipulate the information. And you saw it right off the bat because they came out with the one thing they thought they were the gotcha moment, the Casey Hutchinson testimony where somebody contradicted it. I think Jack Smith could have been a little bit stronger on that, but again, this is just the beginning, and I think we're going to see some major, because he is a professional. He's been doing this for decades. He knows the facts better than anybody. He has them. He's requested to do this in public, and I agree this should be. And we have a lot more to uncover to see what's happening.
Have you gotten any feedback on Truth Social yet? Has there any fireworks happened yet?
I've not seen any reaction on Truth Social.
I saw something on X. On X, you've already started seeing the mega movement start pushing, saying, Jack Smith was going to call, these are liars. It was all a setup. They're using the clips of the fact that Katie Hutchinson said that Donald Trump, and again, the way Katie Hutchinson never said it was her testimony. She said she heard it from somebody.
Right.
So Jack Smith could have very easily just said it was hearsay and move on, but that's where I think he got caught on. And also, Katie Hutchinson was testifying not in a court of law; she was testifying in front of Congress. It's a different type of you need a different type of to qualify to testify. So and they tried to make it painted out that Katie Hutchinson said that Donald Trump jumped over the wheel. She never really testified. If I remember correctly, Zev and Ellie, if you stop me if I'm wrong, she said that she heard from another bodyguard or another Secret Service agent that was there that said that Trump was adamant to go back and to the fact that he leaned over and not grab but pointed or touch whatever, something like that. So but they made it seem like he jumped over the car and the exaggeration.
It was hearsay what she said. I mean, even in that testimony, she never said she saw it. She said that's what happened when she returned to the Secret Service returned. They told her that story. Now maybe they were telling her that story at the moment. Who knows why they maybe it didn't tell her the full story. The fact that they recanted later or said that never happened doesn't make her testimony inadmissible. It just makes her she's reporting on what she heard. Maybe it changed.
And she's and she's very credible. I believe she has no reason. She's I think she came out very strong, very credible. I watched that, and she basically said, "This is what I heard. This is what I witnessed. This is what I was around. This was the inconsistency. This is what Rudy Giuliani. This is what Meadows did." And that's what they do. They try to pick on something again that had nothing to do with her direct testimony. She heard it. It could be false, could be true. Move on. Let's get to the facts, and let's get to the real crimes what Trump committed. The other thing interesting, just also, Ellie, just to catch you up to speed, Zev, it was interesting how Judge Eileen Cannon is playing a major role right off the bat. First of all, because of her ruling that now, she put a gag order on certain stuff that they can't go into, talking about how Trump hid the boxes, right? Is that maybe you could talk a little bit about her gag order?
Yeah.
But also the way Jordan made her seem like she's this prominent judge that is making these rulings when in reality she's Trump's right hand, basically handpicked puppet.
Yeah, I mean, she clearly is a puppet in this case, and she's really trying to obstruct the truth from coming out. I find this really interesting because the headline is really getting buried, and the headline is that Jack Smith is he's going to say and has said that he stands by everything he did, and that the president was correctly charged with all these crimes. And to think that in every instance he's wrong is impossible. Obviously, he might have made one mistake or another, but the reality of it is He's claiming the president did some law breaking here that was very serious. I mean, the Mar-a-Lago documents that he says were concealed and that he refused to release them is clear obstruction of justice. I mean, if the DOJ shows up and says, you got to give us those documents, he has to give it to them, and he deliberately didn't. Hiding these top secret documents inside a ballroom, inside his bathroom, that's clearly not legal. I mean,
Right.
it's just doesn't make sense. And then you got on top of that, and that's one crime, one set of crimes, serious set of crimes, because don't forget the allegation here, the bigger picture thing here is that he was selling those secrets, those nuclear secrets, those very, very top secret things that were part of securing our country. He was selling them to our adversaries and sometimes our friends. So, that's obviously not legal. I mean, it's obviously not something you could do. Now, he hasn't been charged with that part of it, but that's the implication of why he had those top secret documents there in Mar-a-Lago. The other case is basically overturning an election. It's stunning to think that the president of the United States was involved in a conspiracy to have an insurrection and to overturn the elections, and this plot to have these false electors put in place. This is obviously as serious as you can get in a democracy for any president. And, it's still being dismissed by the GOP, many of which were involved in that same conspiracy. Those same people in that hearing, in the dais there, were involved in this conspiracy. And yet they're still sitting there. They shouldn't even be there. They're breaking the law just by being in those positions. This was an insurrection. We all saw it, and we all saw their attempt to steal these votes by having these false electors put in place. These are very serious crimes, and we can get buried in the Hutchison thing or in whether he should have had call logs of the speaker or whatever. But that's minute detail compared to what's really going on here, which is this very skilled prosecutor for 3 decades has been, documented and very successful at prosecuting very, very many people in the public service. Also found that the president of the United States was guilty, or not guilty, was implicated in all these crimes and needed to go up in front of a court. And that never happened.
Well, he went to as far as I think he said that if he would have had the chance to go, he had enough evidence to convict him beyond a reasonable doubt in those crimes.
Yeah.
So I think look, we have a lot to uncover. I mean, they just started. I think they had 2 questions asked, and then they broke I think they're going to get back into chambers soon. But also, I'm going to give you guys a little news without actually giving you some news, but we're going to have some breaking news soon. Again, we have some great volunteers and some great people that are part of this family, Ellie's family, Zev's family, our Love Remembers family. And last night, one of our subscribers has found some really interesting information, which I'm not going to get into, but it has to do with Michael Cohen. And right now, Ellie's doing her digging. I'm sorry. I think she'll share some of that stuff with you, Zev, later today. And just stay tuned, folks, because
I think
might be
Zev might know some of it.
Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe Zev knows some of it.
But I think that sounds really interesting. I thought last night's session was really interesting. I don't know if you got a chance to see it, Ellie, but it was by accident turned out to be a really interesting conversation about why Michael Cohen really matters in this case, and also what kind of character he is and what kind of person he is, and how much the Substack investigators, including yourself, have done to really keep this story going and to keep the questions coming around Trump and all his inner circle. And Michael Cohen is or was part of that inner circle. And obviously in that one clip where he talks about threatening people 500 times, 500 times, not just that's a full-time job of just being the heavy for Donald Trump. I mean, that's no longer just like a little job. That's his job. That was his job. So did it include victims of Epstein or Trump? Quite likely, quite possibly it did.
Yeah. I talked to someone this morning, and one of the questions that they asked was, kind of the ratio of the resistance we have coming from the Trump administration and the MAGA base versus how fast independent journalism and investigation is growing, and how does that balance out? And it is really interesting because the base is shrinking every single day, and the people who would be fighting and investigating on behalf of the Trump administration is shrinking, or they're stepping back, or they don't want to be involved or connected. But meanwhile, this fantastically large group of people on Substack and other platforms are digging and finding out information, and it's just growing every day because everybody wants to be a part of this, this huge co-op of investigators that's, again, finding information on Michael Cohen. But I just found that to be really interesting, that the balance is shifting so much in this investigation, and it's making waves. I mean, it's waves that we haven't had in 7 years.
Yeah. It really is. I mean, this is it's so important that these conversations are happening still, because otherwise the story would be buried. People would not. They're doing everything they can to bury the Epstein story, and the fact that you're continuing to investigate, and there's still such a depth of investigation by everyone on Substack is phenomenal. It really is one of the best examples of crowdsourcing you can imagine. And by the way, in every research I've done about crowdsourcing beats every institutional investigation going. No matter where or how it's done, if you crowdsource information, you have more eyes, more different skill sets looking at all the data. Right. You'll beat the institution that is doing a similar investigation. So, to keep that in mind, you're doing some really important work at home as you're investigating this, and also to you, Ellie. So. And Lev, and thank you for bringing this, keeping your attention on this, because I think it's such a crucial thing that Epstein remains in everyone's attention. And it keeps coming up no matter what, no matter how much they try to bury it. Even watching Morning Joe this morning, they went on about Epstein. I don't know if that's because they're reacting to what we're doing here, but they know that that's still important to bring up.
Yeah,
believe me,
I've noticed a lot of bigger news. Oh, go ahead.
You go ahead, Ilya. No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm getting a lot of feedback from more of these kind of legacy, media that is dwindling, but like they're becoming more interested in independent journalism, and they want to talk about it and they want to understand it better, because I think it's having a greater effect than anything the media has probably ever done up to this point.
It's really dangerous, isn't it, to the regime? I mean, the independent media is something they can't control.
No, there's no overhead. There's no oversight. Nothing.
Yeah, and I think Ellie, I think you said something a while ago that was very important. One of the lives we were doing, and Ellie said something really interesting that I think was one of the biggest things that Trump world underestimated and didn't realize. They didn't realize that, they have only X amount of people in their DOJ with eyes on all of this Epstein stuff. When they released it to the world, they didn't understand, with all the technology, with all the people, the millions of people out there that have become independent journalists, sleuths, looking at that, there would be millions and millions and hundreds of millions of eyes now looking into that stuff. And that is what we're seeing play out. And I'll never forget when Ellie said that. She's like, and that's why I share it with the community, and that's what we're seeing play out. Because so far, we had somebody that we don't wants to remain anonymous, and we respect that. Find in part of the Ellie's community that found that smoking gun. That, just think about, a lot of people missed. It was like a needle in a haystack. And now, yesterday, we have more people coming out, doing work and finding other interesting stuff, connecting certain dots, because we sometimes tend to forget, because there's so much. The biggest strategy of the Donald Trump and MAGA world is flooded with so much information that you forget what happened, let alone 6 years ago, what happened 2 weeks ago or 2 days ago. And I think it's important that we go back in history a little bit and start connecting those dots to be able to uncover what's really being, covered up today. And I think that's incredible work you, Zev, Ellie, and others that, and all of you out there that, are helping out, doing whatever you can, our volunteers, and also our subscribers. So thank you to everybody.
That's a good point. Isn't it amazing how much criming there has been by this guy? I mean, the depth and breadth of the amount of crime is stunning. I mean, we're just talking about Jack Smith here, talking about these two, an insurrection and these espionage charges, and we spoke about Stormy Daniels yesterday and that whole escapade, and there's all these Epstein things that are hanging around this guy. It's just there's no shortage of crimes when it comes to Donald Trump.
No. Yeah, I mean, if we actually get a justice system that does their job, then he'd be a pretty easy case. He'd be a complicated case, but he'd be a pretty easy case to say you're done, you're in prison, everything. But we don't have an uncorrupt justice system at this point at the top, and it is what it is.
Yeah. We don't have a justice system. It's the Trump system. It's
There
the
you
Trump DOJ, right? Right now, it's not the United States DOJ. It's the Trump DOJ.
Which is half the
He
point.
labeled it.
It's not even half the point. It is the point. That's why they have so many FBI
It is the point,
investigators
right?
running around looking for immigrants instead of doing the jobs if they don't want to be investigated. I'm just going to pull back and see that the hearing is we're still in
By the way,
recess here.
actually, if you could can you guys take a look? I think there's some breaking news. Somebody's from Nuuk, Greenland, is coming out and mentioned while we're waiting there. Maybe you guys could Google
Yeah.
it, take a look, because I'm seeing it. Also, I'm going to make some phone calls when we go on break right now, because it looks like Trump met with Zelensky. And there's some things happening also there, and Witkoff and Kushner are on their way to Moscow. So I think there's we should do this during the breaks. We could bring in the other news also if you guys want to look into.
I can share some news about Zelensky and Trump.
Please.
There was, he gave a very
please.
interesting address today and called out the president a couple of times. Certainly, they had met. When he was asked later about how it went, he said, "Do you want to know the truth?" Meaning he was going to sugarcoat whatever was happening. He says they're in the final mile of negotiating an agreement here, but that really it's going to be up to the Russians, and I'm guessing that's why Witkoff and Jared are trying to run over there. It's up to him to resolve this. Putin's got to agree to these deals. It doesn't matter if Zelensky's okay with it and if Trump is okay with it. It's going to be up to him, Vladimir Putin, to determine whether this war ends or not. And we'll see if these two who have got connections to him. I mean, we both know that Jared Kushner has a lot of background with the Kremlin, and so does Witkoff. They're not just impartially going over to represent Donald Trump. They have vested interests in Russia. So we shall see what will happen. But he was pretty strong about the role that Europe can play, but says that Europe isn't playing that role. That Europe really needs to take a lead in fighting this war for democracy, and needs to do it on a much stronger, more proactive basis than they're doing it right now.
Yeah, no, interesting, because some of the stuff I'm hearing before we went live, I've been working the story, and there's more that I'm going to come out after we get off the phone. I'm going to make some phone calls, but a lot of it has again, I say not coincidence, the fact that we're seeing these conversations right now being pressure on Ukraine. Also, Putin yesterday came out, accepted Trump's invitation to be on the Peace Council, but what people don't realize is Putin said the way he's going to give the $1 billion is the U.S. could take the $1 billion out of the frozen funds that they took. And then he also mentioned saying that we could also discuss, part of what we're going to discuss with Witkoff and Kushner is how we could also use those frozen funds to rebuild Ukraine. So they're on also something that happened the day before, yesterday, was in Germany. Because of pressure, because of the United States and pressure from NABU, Ukrainian forces, they arrested somebody connected to Zelensky prior administration with over $3 and something million in cash. And today I spoke to Alexander not too long ago, there were raids going on all over the place. Some of the things I'm hearing from my sources, that part of why Trump had Zelensky come to Davos is to put the hammer on him, to put a lot of pressure. There's a lot of threats behind the scenes. and now part of what Kushner and Witkoff are going to Russia, is not to talk about this peace deal, folks. Trump told you in that coded speech yesterday, it's about Nord Stream 2, it's about energy. Trump told yesterday that the Germans, that the Europeans, the windmills, they need to concentrate on energy. What I'm hearing is this is a similar play. What happened in Venezuela is now going to start taking place in Eastern Europe. Russia is going to becoming a major player in the energy with Trump and Trump's donors working. So that's why they're going there. Has nothing to do with peace. In their mind, peace Zelensky has to give up, and they need to take over and move on.
He was doing, and the
Just take a listen
evidence that
here.
he knew
We haven't got
that
the official
they
camera up
had.
yet, but
I think
the
that this all
MSNBC
gets
are
to the
here
point
showing
of
us
what Democrats are going to be
what
trying to
is
do.
happening
Do go
inside
ahead
the
once
hearing room. So they're getting
they have
together
the
now.
opportunity to ask
So I can
questions.
just turn off
One
their
person,
volume a little bit.
the senior investigative staffer on the
And
committee.
so, we'll get back to this hearing now, and that's good. It's interesting what you're saying there, Lev, about this being about energy. I find it so interesting that, especially with Greenland, Peter Thiel
Yes.
and Bill Gates and all those others are so heavily invested in rare earth minerals in Greenland. To me, that was a very telling thing in the last few days that we've discovered, is how these vast billionaires with huge fortunes who have technology and technology futures in their brain, they're looking at Greenland from a very different perspective. They're looking about it for rare earth minerals. That is why they want American ownership of that territory.
And Trump said that.
Yeah.
And Trump said that yesterday. He said, "Not in our deal." He gave the little quote before we switch back. He said, "In our deal, we got everything we wanted, from the security to the minerals." He added the minerals that added, in which he said nothing. But I'm going to jump off, guys, because I want to
let's get back to the
phone
hearing here.
calls as soon as go. In the meantime, I just want to say the shirt of the day is everyone was in the loop. When it came to the Epstein files, when it comes to this, they're all in the loop, the congressman. So I just wanted to give everybody a heads up.
All right, let's get back to the
Everybody's
coverage
in the
now.
loop.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for jumping on so quickly.
Tony
Thank you.
Ornato's History of Lies. That's June 30, 2022.
Objection.
In July 1, 2022, the men disputing Hutchinson's testimony are two of Trump's biggest acolytes. And finally, June 29, 2022, CNN, Cassidy Hutchinson stands by her testimony amid pushback. Thank you very much.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, over the past few years, Republicans have waged constant attacks on you. Donald Trump has said you are totally compromised, a political hitman, a left-wing radical, a criminal, a fully weaponized monster, and that you should be considered mentally deranged and thrown out of the country. Just this week, he called you a sick bastard. Unfortunately, the rules of decorum prevent me from saying what I think of Donald Trump. But he is not the only one to launch attacks against you. Chairman Jordan has accused you of abusive surveillance and accused you and your team of partisan and politically motivated prosecutions. Despite the mountain of evidence that you laid out in the special counsel's report and in your court filings, President Trump's supporters are convinced that the only reason your team tried to hold him accountable is because you have a vendetta against him. I want to address these allegations today. You have had a long and distinguished career with the Justice Department, including serving as the chief of DOJ's Public Integrity Section for 5 years. While leading the Public Integrity Section, you led investigations and prosecution of public figures and political leaders from both parties, Republicans and Democrats. Can you give us a couple of examples?
Sorry about that. During my time as the chief of public integrity, I investigated cases involving both Republicans and Democrats. The standard in all of those cases was the same: follow the facts and the law. Didn't matter what party you were in, it mattered the facts of the case. In doing that, there were cases I brought against Democrats and cases I brought against Republicans. There were also cases that I investigated and did not bring against Democrats and Republicans. Party affiliation played no role in my investigations. I can think of multiple cases of prominent members of Congress that we investigated who were Republicans, who, upon reviewing the law and the facts, I decided not to go forward in those cases. And the same could be said with people on the Democratic side. I've always tried to follow the facts and the law in my career.
When it comes to deciding whether to pursue a criminal prosecution of an individual, what factors do you consider?
The primary factors are the facts and the law. As a federal prosecutor, in making a prosecutorial decision, you're guided by the federal principles of prosecution, which guide one not only to look at the facts and the law, but the federal interests. And that is exactly what we did in this case, as set forth in my final report.
Does partisan politics play a role in your decision whether or not to prosecute someone?
None.
To be clear, did partisan politics play a role in your decision to charge Donald Trump?
It did not.
What does it do to the justice system if political leaders place pressure on prosecutors to file charges against their political enemies? What are the implications if prosecution decisions are based on politics, not the law?
I think it weakens the rule of law in our country because it weakens the mechanism for us to prosecute, among other things, corruption. When there is political prosecutions targeting people because they're enemies of the president, the department loses credibility and it can't do its job in all sorts of cases.
According to your deposition before this committee, it sounds like your problem was not determining if you had enough evidence to charge Donald Trump, but rather that you might have had too much evidence and struggled to determine how to present a clear narrative to a jury. How would you characterize the evidence against Mr. Trump about inciting an insurrection against the laws of this country? Did you have too much?
Well, with respect to presenting the case that we charged, one of the central challenges was trying to present that in a concise way because we did have so many witnesses. Some of the most powerful witnesses were witnesses who, in fact, were fellow Republicans who had voted for Donald Trump, who had campaigned for him, and who wanted him to win the election. These included state officials, people who worked on his campaign, and advisors. I will say, however, with respect to the charge of insurrection, we did not charge that. As I set forth in my report, well, I believe that there is, courts have found that that was an insurrection and that there's a reasonable interpretation, a reasonable prosecutor could interpret the evidence to support that charge. I chose not to do that, looking at the facts in the law. I thought the charges we brought were appropriate, given the evidence that we had.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for your decades-long public service and for working tirelessly to uphold the rule of law. Those who attack and smear you and your team in order to protect Donald Trump should be ashamed of themselves. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Smith, do you see criminals to my left? You don't see any. Do you see people who are committing crimes because they continue to believe things that just aren't true? That's paraphrasing Ronald Reagan, that liberals aren't stupid, they just know things that don't happen to be true. If the president believed that he was cheated in an election, that there was fraud, or in some other way a number of items led to his defeat, when in fact he should have won according to the Constitution, does that make him a criminal?
Sir,
No, that's a yes or no, please, Mr. Smith. These people here are continuing to grapple constantly with things that aren't true, like socialism works, or that somehow everything the Republicans do is evil and everything they do is right. They've never reached a conclusion in a typical partisan case in which we're not evil because we think something different and we're not wrong. You understand the Constitution. Do you understand the Bill of Rights, that someone has the absolute right to believe something, whether it's true or not, and to advocate for something, whether it's true or not? Do you understand that in addition to your oath to the Constitution, that that's one of the things the First Amendment allows for, isn't it?
yes, sir.
Okay, so if you know that people have a right to opine, lobby for, assert, do everything they can legally to ask for people to make different decisions, then why is it you saw criminal conduct on behalf of a president who believed he didn't win. Chairman Jordan and myself have something in common along with a number of others here. We saw wrongdoing, and on January 6th, we voted not to confirm 2 states because they had violated the U.S. Constitution in how they selected who got ballots. And yet, you're going to come here and say, oh, I just followed the law. When you went after these people and you said, well, technically I can do that, you didn't see any selective nature or any separation of powers under the Constitution to spying on the activities and the conversations of the Speaker of the House? To what end would conversations between the Speaker of the U.S. House, third or second in line to be the President, and the President, in what basis would it be any of your business other than you believe that there was a conspiracy without conspiracy as a basic premise? You, like the President's men for Richard Nixon, went after your political enemies. Maybe they're not your political enemies, but they sure as hell were Joe Biden's political enemies, weren't they? They were Harris's political enemies. They were the enemies of the president, and you were their arm, weren't you?
No.
No. Oh, great. So you spied on the Speaker of the House and these other senators and so on, and informed no one, and in fact put in a gag order so they couldn't discover it. If they were not subjects of a conspiracy investigation, why did Congress, a separate branch that you, under the Constitution, have to respect, why is it that no one should be informed, including the judges? As you went in to spy on these people, did you mention that you were spying on seeking records so you could find out about when conversations occurred between the U.S. Speaker of the House and the President? Did you inform the judge, or did you hold that back?
My office didn't spy on anyone.
Wait a second. The question I asked you, Mr. Smith, was pretty straightforward. Did you withhold that information from an Article III judge in the process of taking the records of the Speaker of the House?
We complied with Department.
Did you hold back
Mr. Chairman,
that
would you
information?
please instruct the gentleman to allow the witness to answer the question?
It's not your time. I'd like my time back.
Mr. Chairman,
again,
you have
please.
repeatedly done that in the past. The witness has the right to answer the question.
And there'll be due time to answer the question. Would you please put my time back and let me finish this? Mr. Smith, I asked you a question and you were not responsive to it, and I want you to be responsive to it. Did you, whether you think it was legal or not, whether you think it was right or not, did you withhold the name of Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House, when you were seeking records on Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, or Jim Jordan, the chairman of this committee?
At the time of the gentleman is...
No,
is- you
please
got
give
a
me
few
back
more
the
seconds.
time that was taken away.
Time has expired, but we're going to let the witness answer your question because it's an important question. The witness can respond.
We did not provide that information to the judge when we requested a non-disclosure order, consistent with the law and consistent with Department
Mr. Chairman, the amazing thing here today is that we have an admission that an Article
Mr. Chairman, the gentleman's time has
Come on.
expired by now 34 seconds.
It gets more than 5 minutes.
How many
'cause it's a
times you
good
can interrupt
question?
me?
The time belongs to the gentleman from California, but it has expired.
I will be brief in my address to the chairman. We have the evidence that an Article I representative on behalf of the president withheld
Order,
from
Mr.
Article
Chairman.
III.
Mr. Chairman, I would
that
be granted the
information.
same leniency at
And
this
with that,
point.
I yield back in
yield
disgust of this witness.
Sticking with California, the gentlelady from California is now recognized.
Mr. Smith, thank you for being here today. Earlier the chairman spent a lot of time talking about Cassidy Hutchinson, who we know was just one of many witnesses. It's important to note that there was testimony that she was told something by Mr. Ornato, not that she had personal knowledge. And of course, Mr. Ornato was of very questionable veracity. We had a testimony from a Metropolitan Police Department official about an argument, a big argument that the president was having about going to the Capitol. And in fact, the vehicle was delayed going back to the Capitol while that argument occurred. But having said that, I want to focus on something my colleagues across the aisle seem to want to ignore. The fact that your investigation into President Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election was built on testimony from members of the Republican Party. In fact, last week, the New York Times published grand jury transcripts from Georgia that show the same pattern in Trump's Georgia criminal case. Georgia's Republican Attorney General Chris Carr testified that he told, quote, and this is a quote, "We're just not seeing the things that you are seeing." And the late Georgia House Speaker David Ralston, also a Republican, testified that Trump's fake elector scheme was, quote, "the craziest thing I've heard." And then there's Senator Lindsey Graham, one of the president's closest allies. In his secret grand jury testimony, Senator Graham told the jurors, quote, "I have told him more times than we can count that he fell short," unquote. And then he said this, quote, "If you told him Martians came and stole votes, he'd be inclined to believe it." Martians, that's from Senator Graham speaking under oath. So here's my question. Mr. Smith, in your deposition with this committee, you testified, and here's a quote, "Our case was built on, frankly, Republicans who put their allegiance to the country before the party." Also, that the president's closest allies are telling him that his claims of election fraud are wrong. And so I'm just wondering, can you explain what you meant in your deposition that it was Republicans who were putting their allegiance to their country ahead of their party?
Yes. There were witnesses who I felt would be very strong witnesses, including, for example, the Secretary of State in Georgia, who told Donald Trump the truth, told him things that he did not want to hear, and put him on notice that what he was saying was false. These were people who knew how the elections were conducted in these states, and I believe that witnesses of that nature, witnesses who are willing to tell the truth, even if it's going to impose a cost on them in their lives, my experience as a prosecutor over 30 years is that witnesses like that are very credible, and that jurors tend to believe witnesses like that because they pay a cost for telling the truth.
In terms of the grand jury testimony that's now been released, the fact that Donald Trump, according to Senator Graham, would believe that Martians stole the election, what does that tell you about Trump's state of mind?
That statement is consistent with what we found in our investigation, in that our investigation revealed that Donald Trump was not looking for honest answers about whether there was fraud in the election. He was looking for ways to stay in power. And when people told him things that conflicted with him staying in power, he rejected them, or he chose not even to contact people like that who would know if the election was done properly in the state. On the other hand, when individuals would say things that would allow him to stay in power, no matter how fantastical, he would latch on to those. That pattern, over time, we felt was powerful evidence that he, in fact, knew that the fraud claims he was making were false.
You know, who were some of the Republican witnesses who told you that who told President Trump that his claims of election fraud were false? Can you share that with us?
There were a range of witnesses. They ranged from people on his campaign team who had wanted him to win, were employed to help him win the election. They included state officials, state Republican officials who wanted him to win, voted for him, campaigned for him, asked him and his co-conspirators to provide evidence to support their claims, and invariably they never did. It included officials, advisors, people he worked with in the White House who he relied upon for important decisions and who he trusted in other contexts. We felt we had strong evidence from a variety of sources.
Time of the gentlelady has expired.
Ms. Chairman, with my fellow Californian, you were allowing the witness.
Yeah, it's a good question. Isn't that grounds to let him answer?
I've given him 30 seconds extra, the gentlelady 30 seconds extra. If the gentleman can be concise and finish up here quickly, we will allow him to finish.
Yes, sir. And just conclude saying we felt that constituted powerful evidence of the knowing falsity of his statements in furtherance of the fraud.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to yield back, noting the presence of officers who were severely attacked.
Got nothing to yield back. You're a minute over. The gentleman from
Protecting
Texas.
our lives on January 6th.
The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Smith, in January of 2023, did you subpoena then Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy's toll records?
Yes, sir, we did.
Yes, you did. And the subpoena covered the time period between November 2020 and January 2021. Is that right?
I'm sorry, sir, could you say that again?
We're not going to delay like this. The subpoena covered the time period between November of 2020 and January 2021. How many days after Kevin McCarthy was sworn in as Speaker did you subpoena his records?
I don't recall, but those two things had nothing to
It
do
was
with one.
16 days after becoming the highest-ranking Republican in the House of Representatives. You subpoenaed his toll records. Do you agree that that might reasonably be considered a violation of the speech or debate clause?
I do not, and I want to be clear that the toll
You were
records...
collecting months' worth of phone data on the Republican Speaker of the House, the leader of the opposition, right after he got sworn in as Speaker, all around the time of a major vote. That sounds like a flagrant violation of the speech or debate clause to me, and I think most people agree with me. And Speaker McCarthy had no recourse, did he? Because you issued a non-disclosure order ensuring that neither he nor any of the American people knew about these subpoenas. Is that right?
The toll record, the non-content toll record subpoenas, we did secure non-disclosure orders for those subpoenas.
You did, and let me ask you, Mr. Smith, at the time you secured those non-disclosure orders, was Speaker McCarthy a flight risk?
The non-disclosure order was based on concerns about...
Was Speaker McCarthy a flight risk?
He was not.
He was not. Then why did your non-disclosure order refer to him as a flight risk? It says right here, the court finds reasonable grounds to believe that such disclosure will result in flight from prosecution.
Sir, when securing a non-disclosure order, the risks don't have to be
You
associated...
think that the Speaker of the House is a flight risk?
The question?
No, this is not your time. This is my time. You think the Speaker of the House is a flight risk? You think he's going to hop on a plane and leave the country?
No, what I was trying to explain is, with respect to a non-disclosure order, the risks aren't necessarily associated with the subscriber to the phone. They're the risks to the investigation.
I think that you were using, this was clearly in reference to Speaker McCarthy, and you were using clearly false information to secure a non-disclosure order to hide from Speaker McCarthy and from the American people the fact that you were spying on his toll records. But I've got more, so let's move on. In May of 2023, you also issued subpoenas for toll records of 9 U.S. senators and an additional representative. Is that right?
In May of 23, we did issue...
You did, and there were non-disclosure orders in conjunction with those subpoenas as well, right?
That's correct, consistent with department policy and the law.
So again, nobody would know what you were doing. The senators would, and the representatives would, and the American people wouldn't know what you were doing. Is that right?
The toll records that we secured and the non-disclosure orders were consistent with policy and consistent...
And you knew whenever you were doing that there was a risk you were violating the speech or debate clause. Is that right?
The toll record subpoenas that we secured were with the concurrence of the public integrity...
Your own analysis says that you knew there was a risk you were violating the speech or debate clause. I have it right here. This is an email from John Keller at Public Integrity Section to your team. As you are aware, quote, as you are aware, there is some litigation risk regarding whether compelled disclosure of toll records of a member's legislative calls violates the speech or debate clause in the D.C. Circuit. That's from your own analysis right there. So you did know, didn't you?
Sir, with respect to the item you just put up on the screen, the last sentence states...
oh, we're going to get to the last sentence.
Okay.
We're going to get to the last sentence. And you cite case law in here, quote, the bar on compelled disclosure is absolute. Is that right? Or do you think that you didn't have to abide by that precedent?
To be clear, this statement is not from my office. This is the statement of the Public
This is
Integrity
your
Section.
justification for those subpoenas and NDOs that you ordered. This was part of your analysis. It's a cursory analysis. I think it's worth noting. But let's get to that last sentence then. Quote, given my understanding of the low likelihood that any of the members listed below would be charged, the litigation risk should be minimal here. In other words, you're using a novel legal theory, which you knew was novel, has never been tested by any court. You're not charging any of these members. Nobody's going to know about it because you issued NDOs. Nobody's going to sue about it, so who cares? We're going to do it anyways. I mean, you walked all over the Constitution throughout this entire process.
Mr. Chairman, the gentleman's time's
spying
expired.
on members of Congress, and you know it. It's absolutely disgraceful. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Not going to be charged. They're not going to see it. They're not going to know because we're not going to tell them. So let's go ahead and do it. It's exactly what happened. The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Smith, it's great that you've been allowed to come here and testify to the American public. Is there anything you'd like briefly to discuss that Mr. Gill brought up on the reasons why you needed those phone records and the limitations that you thought might have been on you and the prosecution to risk the investigation?
Sure, and I would begin by pointing out that the email that was referenced wasn't a justification from my office. It was an email from the Public Integrity Section to my office approving the subpoenas. The subpoenas that we secured with non-disclosure orders from a judge because I had grave concerns about obstruction of justice in this investigation, specifically with regards to Donald Trump. Not only did we have the obstruction of justice that we were investigating in the classified documents case, but I was aware during the course of our investigation of targeting of witnesses during the course of the conspiracy itself. There were election workers who had their lives turned upside down and received vile death threats because they were targeted by Donald Trump and his co-conspirators. I had a duty to protect witnesses in this investigation. That risk, that threat to witnesses was only confirmed when we went forward in this case and Donald Trump suggested that one witness should be put to death and then also issued a statement to the effect of, if you come after me, I'm coming after you. In my mind, I can't think of a more direct threat to witnesses and individuals involved in that proceeding. Given that sort of threats, it was, in my view, completely appropriate to protect the integrity of the investigation, to protect against destruction of evidence, and to protect the witnesses in our case.
And just to make clear, you did not see any of the discussion. There was not any, it was just the content that they made a call to the president and vice versa, but nothing about any content whatsoever.
That's correct. A toll record subpoena gives you who a call is from, who it is to, and the length of that call. It does not tell you the content of what people are speaking about.
You felt that you had a case that was one that you would win beyond a reasonable doubt, no moral certainty. Is there anything in your facts that you had that you would have used at trial that you believe has not been presented to the public in the past or have been misrepresented to the public?
Is there anything?
Essential facts that you had that you felt would have resulted in a conviction of the president on the charges that he was indicted upon?
I think my report, the report of our case, the final report, summarizes the evidence, I think, in a way that gives a fair reading of the strength of the case.
And you have no question but have been successful before jury?
My review of the case, I came to the conclusion we had proof beyond a reasonable doubt. We were ready, willing, and able to go to trial in the case. Of course, as I said in my opening statement, prosecutors can't control outcomes, but I felt confident in pursuing the case to trial.
Did Merrick Garland ever pressure you to bring an indictment or to do anything in your investigation?
No.
Did anybody else in the administration, President Biden, Vice President Harris, et cetera?
I was given the independence to conduct my investigation, and I came to the decision to bring charges in this case without undue influence from anybody in the department.
And you dropped the case. Why did you drop the case?
The cases against Donald Trump were dismissed pursuant to department policy.
Department policy, the Office of Legal Counsel said if somebody's president, you can't bring a charge against them or they can't be held liable. Is that correct?
That's correct. There had not been a case of this nature ever where someone was elected president with charges pending, and so that was slightly different. So we consulted with with the Office of Legal Counsel, and they determined pursuant to policy that the cases needed to be dismissed.
And you weren't pleased with that, but you had to follow the law, and that's what you did.
We followed policy throughout my investigation. My job was not to set policy, my job was to follow it, and that's what we did.
I want to thank you for your service. I think you're a great American, and you came out of this as being somebody who people can respect and look up to in a fashion that we should be instilling people's desire to go into justice, to go into law, and to go into government. And you're an example of the type of person they should follow. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields it back. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Smith, there's something that's really bothering me since your deposition. It's how and why you got the position of special counsel and your personal relationship with Marshall Miller. Let's go back to 1999 when you were working for the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York. Is that when you first met Marshall Miller?
Yes.
So after ED New York, did the two of you ever work together again prior to becoming special counsel? According to the public bios for you and Mr. Miller, you overlapped at DOJ from 2014-15 when you were chief of DOJ's Public Integrity Section and Mr. Miller was chief of staff for DOJ's Criminal Division. Is that accurate?
I believe that is accurate, yes.
Okay, so were the two of you social outside of work?
I would say intermittently, yes.
Okay, but after 20 years of knowing each other, it's safe to say you were friends, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let's fast forward to 2022. Mr. Miller is appointed Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General at DOJ, the number 3 at DOJ. You call your friend to congratulate him, and according to the deposition transcript, you say you'd be interested in a position at DOJ. Is that correct?
Yes. What I recall is that I expressed an interest if the right position came up, I would be interested in considering.
But at that point, there's no discussion about special counsel. Is that correct?
This is some time ago, and so I don't have a specific recollection of all these conversations.
So you were first approached about special counsel and that role before the 22 midterm elections. And according to the deposition transcript, in October of 2022, you fly to DC, meet with the AG and the Deputy Attorney General. Is that correct?
Yes, I flew to DC, I believe it was in October, and I met the Deputy Attorney General, and also I met the Attorney General.
So in multiple conversations with your friend Marshall Miller, he never once tipped you off that the Attorney General or Deputy Attorney General have you on the short list for special counsel? That never came up?
Again, this was some time ago, but my recollection is I came to Washington and I met with those individuals as well as the Human Rights Section. Marshall Miller is the person who set that up.
So he was at the meetings. Was he at the meetings? So just to tie all this together, you've known Mr. Miller since you were both AUSA in New York. You stayed in touch over a 20-year career in federal government. He gets a job with the Biden administration, and just a few short months later, you're offered the role of special counsel. I'm having a hard time believing that this is some big coincidence and that there wasn't a back and forth on the special counsel. So maybe you never received directives explicitly from the AG or the Deputy Attorney General, but was Marshall Miller, did he become a two-way conduit throughout the investigation with DOJ?
No, and I would not take direction from a political person, a political figure, about how I should conduct an investigation.
But you never spoke to him throughout the entire time you were conducting the investigation?
No, I didn't say that. What I said was
that
he was, I think you asked if he was a conduit of information. He was present, to my recollection, at meetings, briefings that I had with the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General during my time as special counsel.
I mean, I don't want to assume anything, but Mr. Miller wanted you in that position, not because you're necessarily the best lawyer he ever met, but because of the long-term friendship that you have with him.
What I can tell you is I have been a prosecutor for 30 years. I have been an apolitical public servant for 30 years. I've prosecuted cases against Democrats and Republicans all the same. I've had, in my view, the experience necessary for this position, and that's why I accepted it.
So he knew that you would pursue, I mean, he had to have an idea that you would pursue exactly what the Biden administration wanted, which was criminal charges against President Trump.
I think that anybody who knows me well knows the idea that I would take direction from a political figure about how an investigation should come out. I don't think anybody who knows me thinks that's true.
Well, Chairman Jordan, I think the next deposition should be with Marshall Miller at this point. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
And while we are deposing Marshall Miller, maybe we can depose Donald Trump about why he chose his personal lawyer to be the head of the DOJ. On January 6, 2026, the 5th anniversary of the insurrection, the White House launched a taxpayer-funded website that attempts to rewrite history about what happened on that day of infamy. On January 6, 2021, there was an insurrection at the United States Capitol that resulted in a police officer dying the next day, another 4 officers dying by suicide in the months thereafter, with at least 140 police officers being injured by the insurrectionists, with 15 of them requiring hospitalization. And I'm proud that we have 4 former officers as well as on-duty Capitol Hill police officers here today. Mr. Smith, I want to ask you about this website because the Trump administration is using taxpayer dollars to lie to the American people about the events leading up to and the events taking place on January 6, 2021. For example, this Trump propaganda site claims that the 2020 election was, quote, stolen. Mr. Smith, did your investigation uncover evidence sufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump knew that his claim that the election was stolen was false?
Yes, it did.
And did your investigation uncover evidence sufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump publicly claimed that the 2020 election was stolen from him while he privately acknowledged that he had lost the election?
Yes, we cited instances of that during in our case.
But yet here we see that on the 5th anniversary of the insurrection, the Trump White House propaganda machine is still promoting the stolen election theory on this government webpage with a text box titled, quote, fraudulent election, stolen election certified, end quote. The site also has a subsection reading in part, quote, FBI entrapment operation exposed. Mr. Smith, did your investigation develop any evidence to support the allegation that the FBI entrapped insurrectionists into committing crimes on January 6th?
Our investigation revealed that Donald Trump is the person who caused January 6th, that it was foreseeable to him, and that he sought to exploit the violence.
This website also accuses you of being a, quote, Biden prosecutor who brought, quote, weaponized charges against Mr. Trump. Mr. Smith, were you a Biden prosecutor who weaponized the Department of Justice against Donald Trump?
Absolutely not.
Did Attorney General Merrick Garland direct you to prosecute Trump because Donald Trump was running against Joe Biden in the presidential election?
No.
There are also allegations that President Trump was the victim of, quote, lawfare and accusations that the Department of Justice lawyers who prosecuted Donald Trump used, quote, fabricated indictments and rigged show trials. Did you, Mr. Smith, or the men and women working on your team work to fabricate indictments or put on rigged show trials?
No, we secured indictments from grand juries, and we were prepared to prove our case in court beyond a reasonable doubt.
Did you use your appointment as special counsel to conduct a politically motivated witch hunt, scam investigation, and prosecution of Donald Trump?
I did not. We followed the facts and we followed the law. Where that led us was to an indictment of an unprecedented criminal scheme to block the peaceful transfer of power.
And those indictments have been dismissed. Can they be re-brought or resurrected after Trump leaves office?
They were dismissed without prejudice.
So they can be refiled? And he can be prosecuted after he leaves office, is that correct?
I'm not going to speak to that. I can only speak to what we did, which was dismiss the case without prejudice.
All right. The website put out by the Trump White House on the anniversary of January 6th is nothing more than a pack of lies. It proves that Donald Trump is hell-bent on misusing taxpayer dollars in a feeble attempt to rewrite his criminal history and the history of what happened on January 6, 2021. And with that, I yield back, but I would like to, Mr. Chairman, offer for the record
Unanimous consent?
Unanimous consent. A statement from Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency released on November 12, 2020 that states the November 3rd election was the most secure in American history.
Objection.
And also testimony from, I would like to request unanimous consent to enter into the record the September 24th, 2020 testimony of Trump's former FBI Director, Chris Wray, who told Senate Homeland Security, the Homeland Security Committee of the Senate, that the FBI had, quote, not seen or historically had any kind of coordinated national voter fraud effort in a major election.
Without objection.
And last but not least, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this article titled, Disputing Trump, Barr Says No Widespread Election Fraud.
Without objection. The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, on November 18th, 2022, A.G. Garland appointed you as special counsel. Can you tell me about your swearing in or the oath of office that you took after that?
I don't recall the specifics of it. I know I was sworn in. I don't recall the specifics of how that was done.
You don't remember who swore you in?
I don't.
Would you agree that taking the oath of office is a legal requirement for the job that you had?
I've taken oaths of office regularly. I haven't researched whether it's required or not, but I have done that, I think, in every government case.
It is required. Terms I heard earlier today were atypical, irregular, no proper procedure. Yet in your opening statement, you said that we followed Justice Department policies, and I would assume you meant the law as well. It strikes me as odd that you don't remember who swore you in, how you were sworn in. It's pretty significant. We all get sworn in here, and I remember every day. You don't remember who swore you in?
I don't remember the details of it as I sit here today.
But you did take the oath of office before you got rolling.
I think my recollection is it was when I was appointed.
It was when. It strikes me as odd that Attorney General Garland had you retake the oath of office on the 14th of September of the following year. Why did he make you do that?
As I sit here right now, I do not recall. I know that there is the oath of office that I signed. I believe it was on the 18th, the day that I was appointed. And I know the department had me do a second one. I don't know the particulars of why they asked me to do it again, but I know
you signed it on the 20th of November 22nd, November 2022, but there was no witness, which, I mean, you have to agree it's a little odd. If there's no witness saying that you took the oath of office, it would maybe make someone like me question whether or not you were legitimately doing the job until you finally took the oath of office. It sounds like the Attorney General had the same question and thought, oh shit, we got to have him sign this on the 14th day of September of the following year. So why did you take the oath of office again on the 14th of September of the following year when you say you took the office in November of 2022? Why'd you need to do it twice?
My recollection is that I took the oath of office, as you said, it was the 18th or the 20th, and felt I was under the oath of office. I believe, if you have it in front of you, I think I signed an oath.
You signed it, but there was no witness. There was supposed to be either notarized or a witness, and apparently Attorney General Garland thought it was significant enough to have you do another oath 11 months later. That's strange, right?
I don't know why they asked me to sign it again. I don't recall ever discussing this issue with Attorney General Garland.
Well, that is just wild to me. I'd like to yield the balance of my time to Mr. Jordan.
Well, which one was the official one? Which one counted? I think that's what the gentleman's asking.
I understood myself to have taken the oath of office when I assumed the job.
How much money did you? Okay. How much money did you spend in the investigating President Trump? How much money did your office spend?
I do not recall as I sit here now, but I know that pursuant to, I believe it's the special counsel regulations, reports were issued each 6 months detailing how much.
We gathered at $35 million. And what I want to know is how much of that $35 million of taxpayer money did you give to confidential human sources? We know you gave $20,000 to someone. It just got reported last week. How much more money did you pay confidential people we don't know about, with American tax money going after the guy we elected president?
My recollection regards the $20,000, which was not a payment from me. It was me approving a payment by the FBI to a confidential human source who was reviewing video and photographic
Who's the source?
evidence. I do not know the identity of the source.
How many other payments went to this source or other sources?
As I sit here, I do not know the answer to that question. My role as special counsel,
$35 million, and you're giving money to people the country doesn't know who they are, and you're giving their hard-earned money to these folks? The main question I have, too, with this is, why'd you have to do it? You subpoenaed bank records from the RNC, phone records from members of Congress. You got subpoenas for bank records for people sitting right there in the front row. Why did you have to pay people for information when you could subpoena them and get it?
Time has expired.
Time has expired. You can answer the question, though. Country'd like to know why you had to do it.
My recollection and understanding is the payment, the $20,000 that I approved, was for a confidential human source to assist in the review of video and photographic evidence showing people who were attacking the Capitol, attacking police officers, obstructing the proceeding, and seeing if we could prove that some of those people had come directly.
That wasn't my question, but my time has expired. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Smith, I want you to have the utmost confidence in what you did. You did everything right. Harry Dunn, Danny Hodges, Sergeant Cannell, Mike Fanone, they did everything right. These guys, my Republican colleagues, are a joke. They're wrong. History will harshly judge them, so I want you to lean in today. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You did everything right, sir. And I am these guys are so lucky they're not under oath, because they would have to tell you what they really think of Trump. They call him crooked. They call him cruel. They call him a scumbag. I've heard you all say it. You're lucky you're not under Trump, but when the lights go on and the cameras are on, you're tiny, you're small, you shrink. Everyone remembers Matt Gaetz coming over here after a committee hearing. He would laugh at how stupid he thought Trump was. This is all a show. And Mr. Smith, you're just the latest act that they've brought in. But they can't erase what happened on January 6th because we saw it with our own eyes. Mr. Smith, After the mainstream media called the race for Biden about a week after the election, did Donald Trump concede the election?
He did not.
The next month, the Electoral College met in every state and voted Biden as the winner. Did Donald Trump concede then?
He did not.
Shortly after that, the last court case that Donald Trump brought was thrown out. Did he concede then?
No.
Is it your judgment then that only Donald Trump could have convened the mob in the size that it was assembled on January 6th?
Our assessment of the evidence is that he is the person most responsible for what happened on January 6th. He caused what happened. It was foreseeable to him. And then when it happened, he tried to exploit it in furtherance of the conspiracy.
And you actually obtained indictments from a grand jury, right? You went to a grand jury and did something that the Trump administration has not been able to do as they go after their enemies. Their cases are being thrown out. You obtained criminal indictments against the president. Is that right?
That's correct.
Mr. Smith, do you know who Edward Loya is?
I'm sorry?
Edward Loya, L-O-Y-A?
I believe Mr. Loya worked at the Public Integrity Section when I was
Did you know that he said of you, when it comes to investigating allegations of sophisticated federal criminal matters, Jack Smith is the gold standard? Do you know who Mr. James McGovern is?
Yes, he was a prosecutor I worked with in New York.
Did you know that he said of you, I have no idea what Mr. Smith's political beliefs are because he's completely apolitical? So are you a registered independent?
I have no partisan loyalties. I don't know if I'm registered as independent or not registered at all.
Are you glad you accepted Attorney General Garland's request to be a special prosecutor, even though you've been dragged over political barbed wire and your family has been subjected to death threats?
I don't regret it.
Do you remember where you were on September 11th?
I do.
What did you think of that day?
I was in Brooklyn when that happened. I was at the command center that night. I worked on that investigation. I remember pretty clearly.
Do you remember where you were on January 6th?
On January 6th, I was living in Europe working for the State Department seconded to a war crimes tribunal.
What did you think as you watched on television what happened at the Capitol that day?
To be honest with you, I don't recall if I saw it that day or a later day because of the time period.
What did you think when you saw it?
I was shocked. I was shocked by it. I obviously, being in Europe and not following things as closely, I was not, frankly, up to speed on the events leading up to it.
What shocked you about it?
I just never seen anything like that happen in our country.
Mr. Smith, I don't know if I'll ever have the honor to talk to you again. If I don't, please know that I and my colleagues on the Democratic side, and even my Republican colleagues when they speak privately, have nothing but respect and appreciation for what you tried to do and how you did it. You, unlike many here, are a man of honor. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Smith, you appear before this committee today not as a neutral observer of the law, but at one point you were one of the most powerful prosecutors in the federal system, armed with enormous discretion, minimal oversight, and a mandate that goes to the very heart of our constitutional order. You brought charges during an active election cycle. You relied on legal theories that had never before been tested in context. And you did so while disregarding long-standing Department of Justice policies designed to prevent prosecutors from influencing elections. Mr. Smith, you claimed in your investigation you developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in criminal scheme to overturn the results in the 2020 election and to prevent lawful transfer of power. However, a few weeks ago in Georgia, Fulton County election board officials stated that 315,000 ballots were certified without required signatures on the tabulator tapes for poll workers. These signatures were required by the Georgia statute. If not counted, this could have turned the state of Georgia red, and I won't doubt there were similar schemes in many other states. You were illegally appointed to serve as special counsel since you were not confirmed by advance and consent Senate and stated as stated in the Appointments Clause. You also issued an indictment against then-President Biden's most formidable political opponent. The candidate was President Trump, and you issued a gag order for President Trump during a 2024 election cycle. This was a major violation of President Trump's First Amendment rights and a poor attempt to outright censor the leading political candidate. These actions were nothing short of election interference. 9 senators, including Senator Tuberville from my state of Alabama, and multiple Republican members of the House of Representatives had their phones subpoenaed, or their records subpoenaed. Some you seized their phones. Even then, Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy, one of the highest-ranking Republicans in the country, had his phone records subpoenaed, all for political gain. These subpoenas clearly violated the Speech and Debate Clause. As John Keller of the DOJ's Public Integrity Section addressed this issue in an email dated May 17th of 2023, D.C. Circuit President stated that the Speech and Debate Clause, and the bar is this, bar on compelled disclosure is absolute. These instances are not only the tip of the iceberg about you and your team's flagrant disregard of the Constitution. Mr. Smith, your actions have changed and damaged confidence in our justice system. Today, this committee will determine whether that damage was a result of reckless judgment, political bias, or deliberate misuse of authority. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield you the balance of my time for questions.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I want to go back to that email, if we could put that up, this email that Mr. Gill highlighted a few minutes ago. This is the justification from the Public Integrity section. If you look at the bottom, John Keller, Public Integrity section, for going and getting the phone records, toll records of members of Congress. And there's a couple things I want to highlight. That first highlighted area, there is some litigation risk. So they admit there's some concern here. And they send the copy to Jack Smith's team. And then you go down later, as Mr. Gill pointed out, the case law is clear. A legislator may intervene and oppose such use. So the risk is real. But here's the deal. There was really no risk because we weren't going to know. They weren't going to tell us. They made sure they didn't tell us because they went to the judge and got a gag order. And look at the last sentence. The last sentence. Low likelihood that any of the members listed below would be charged. So they're not going to know because we're not going to charge any of these guys. They didn't do anything wrong. And so therefore, the litigation risk should be minimal. They're not going to be charged. We're not going to go after them. The litigation risk is minimal. And it's minimal because, frankly, it's non-existent because they're not going to know. And we're going to make sure they don't know because we're not even going to tell the judge who we're getting the gag orders on. And yet, Mr. Smith thought that was A-okay. That was just fine. That was in the letter and the spirit of the Constitution. I find that hard to believe. And you know why? You know why everyone knows it's wrong? Because the Public Integrity section at the Justice Department has now changed its policy. You can't do this anymore. They've changed their policy. But it was okay for Jack Smith to do it because we got to get Trump. We got to get the president. That's what this was all about. Yield back to the gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I have Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a transcript of the voicemail that President Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, left Senator Tuberville on January 6th, in which he states, "I'm calling you because I want to discuss with you how they're trying to rush this hearing and how we need you, our Republican friends, to try to just slow it down so we can get these legislatures to get more information."
Without objection. Gentleman yields back to the chair. Now recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The House Judiciary Committee is responsible for helping to ensure the rule of law. Unfortunately, the chairman of this committee ignored a bipartisan congressional subpoena directed at him. His actions have made it harder for this committee and other congressional committees to get witnesses and testimony and damage the rule of law. Now, before I ask questions of Mr. Smith, I just want to make a simple observation. How scared are Republicans of talking about the Epstein files? They're so scared that they literally are calling Jack Smith the distinguished federal prosecutor who secured multiple indictments against Donald Trump with multiple felony counts. Republicans would rather talk about the criminality of Donald Trump in trying to steal an election and trying to stop the peaceful transfer of power, and the criminality of Donald Trump in stealing classified documents, obstructing justice, than about Donald Trump's associations with Jeffrey Epstein and his pedophilia ring. I demand this committee, this chairman, and Republicans to call an immediate hearing asking why the Department of Justice is refusing to release 99% of the Epstein files and why the DOJ is violating the law right now. I have questions, Mrs. Smith, for you, and thank you for being here today. My questions center on interactions or lack of interactions between the Biden administration and yourself. Did President Biden or anyone in the Biden White House ever direct you to seek retribution against anyone perceived to be Biden's political opponent?
No.
Did the Biden administration or President Biden or anyone in the White House ever write a social media post directing you to seek retribution against any particular individual?
No.
Did President Biden or anyone else in the Biden White House ever direct you to take any prosecutorial step whatsoever?
No.
Okay. Donald Trump made it clear he wanted to seek retribution against New York Attorney General Tish James. Trump relentlessly attacked her, saying, quote, she should be prosecuted and, quote, arrested and punished because she dared to hold Trump accountable for Trump's fraud in New York. Trump weaponized the Department of Justice, and the Trump DOJ opened a sham investigation into her alleged mortgage fraud. We know it's a sham investigation because they couldn't even get twice grand juries to secure indictments against her. When interim U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert, who Donald Trump himself appointed, spent 5 months investigating Tish James, he concluded there was not enough evidence to go forward. And what did Trump do? He fired his own U.S. attorney. Mrs. Smith, did President Biden or anyone else in the Biden White House ever tell you that Donald Trump should be, quote, arrested and punished?
No.
Did President Biden or anyone else in the Biden White House ever threaten to fire you based on any action you took or did not take?
No.
Donald Trump also directed the Trump DOJ to open investigations into his own appointees who refused to do his bidding. His DOJ recently investigated Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell because Powell won't cede to Trump's bullying on interest rates. Did President Biden or anyone else in the Biden White House ever direct you to go after any Biden appointee?
No.
Okay. I just want to say a little bit about what the Republicans have brought up about these phone toll records. Do you believe the Speaker of the House is above the law?
No, I don't believe anybody should be above the law.
Right. And U.S. senators are not above the law, correct?
No.
Yeah. And members of Congress are not above the law, right?
No.
Yeah, that's right, because we're not. And what Republicans are trying to argue is somehow, if you're doing an investigation, you can't do stuff to senators or members of Congress. Get out of here. We're just under a law like everybody else. And by the way, the speech and debate clause only applies to legislative acts, communications with legislative acts. Stealing a frickin' election and trying to do so is not a legislative act. It is a crime. So I don't know what the heck they're talking about. And this is so stupid. I'm a former prosecutor. You never in an investigation go and try to get someone's toll records or phone records and then tell them, hey, dude, we're about to get your phone records. Of course you wouldn't tell them. What the Republicans are saying today is just idiotic. I am so pleased you're here on national TV telling the American people that Trump was indicted. He was indicted lawfully, and multiple grand juries secured those indictments. Thank you for your service, and history will look upon you well. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Florida is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Smith, you have a long tenure at the Department of Justice. Would you agree with the statement that DOJ charging policies require prosecutors to bring charges only where the admissible evidence is expected to be sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction? Is that right?
That is correct. That's from the federal principles of prosecution.
And in this case you brought against President Trump, One of the charges you pursued was under Title 18, Section 371, which requires an agreement to interfere with the lawful function of the United States through deceit or dishonesty that the defendant knowingly and intentionally joined, and an overt act. And what I'd like to ask you about is this. So you would agree that Section 371 requires dishonesty or deceit and also proof that a criminal defendant acted knowingly and intentionally. Is that right?
I believe that's correct. It requires knowing deceit targeted a lawful government function.
So you would then also agree, would you not, that opinion, disagreement, or even mistake is insufficient to satisfy the burden of criminal intent set forth in that statute?
A mistake certainly would. We needed to prove and intended to prove at trial that the false statements that Donald Trump made were knowingly false.
That they were false and that it was done knowingly. So even under your theory of the case, even if we took your facts as true, you still would have been required to prove that the president said something false and that he or did it knowingly. So going on to your next charge, let's talk about obstruction. There too, that charge requires proof of wrongful intent, does it not?
That's correct.
So if a defendant there actually believes a factual claim is true, that would mean he could not be convicted of that charge. Isn't that right?
Well,
Not correctly convicted.
The defendant for that charge would have to behave corruptly, and corruptly could include seeking an unlawful benefit, seeking a benefit to benefit themselves, in this case, to stay in office when they had, in fact, not won the election.
But there, too, there's a requirement of intent, that this conduct must be knowing and intentional. Isn't that right?
There is an intent requirement, yes.
And
corrupt
didn't you
intent.
also acknowledge in your deposition that the president was receiving information from multiple advisors? Giuliani, Eastman, Clark, Powell, and in your deposition you said he was almost just regurgitating what they told him. Isn't that right?
I don't believe I said he was regurgitating what they told him. I think what I said is that he was making knowingly false claims, that he was believing anything that would keep him in office, and he was rejecting anything.
You would agree that those people, or some people, were giving the president conflicting advice at that time, would you not?
You are correct in that his original campaign staff told him he had lost. He fired them and brought in people who would...
But criminal liability, under the statutes you used in your indictment, requires proving intent, not simply the undermining of democratic norms or expressing an opinion with which you do not agree. So is it not correct, sir, that here you charged 2 intent-based crimes without any direct proof whatsoever that the conduct charged was knowing, intentional, or that you were going to have an adequate basis to sustain a conviction at trial?
I felt we had proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I felt that that proof included direct testimony from a number of witnesses to prove the knowing falsity of his claims.
Despite the fact that in your own deposition you acknowledge the existence of conflicting advice. If this defendant were anyone other than Donald J. Trump, Mr. Smith, I find it hard to believe that we would be sitting here today having a hearing about an indictment that was returned knowing that the elements of the offenses could not be demonstrated. Now, let's talk about this. I assume you're also familiar with the Department of Justice policy that prohibits prosecutors from selecting the timing of investigative or prosecutorial actions for the purpose of affecting any election.
Yes, I am. That's the election year sensitivities policy, and we followed it in all respects. The public integrity section, who administers that policy, concurred that we followed it in all respects.
Mr. Chairman, my time has expired.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes the ranking member for UC.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. This is from John Dowd. I was Donald Trump's lawyer. Jack Smith should be celebrated, not vilified. December 16th, 2025, last month.
Objection?
I ask unanimous consent to enter the record a criminal complaint filed by the Trump Department of Justice on December 13, 2025, detailing how Kash Patel and the FBI used a confidential human source and an undercover FBI agent to investigate a bomb threat in Los Angeles. And then finally, this is an article published by The Verge on October 19, 2023, titled "Peter Thiel was reportedly an FBI informant," which reports that Peter Thiel served as a confidential human source for the FBI.
Without objection, the gentleman from Arizona is recognized for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First one is from MSN.com. Biden's FBI paid anti-Trump sedition hunters as informants in J6 Arctic frost probes.
Without objection.
Jack Smith team approved $20,000 payment to informant to snitch on Trump during Arctic frost probe.
Without objection.
AT&T turned Kevin McCarthy's cell phone records over to Jack Smith.
Without objection.
Biden's legal team met with Jack Smith aide before Trump indictment.
Without objection.
Jack Smith deposition gives insight into failed effort to hold Trump accountable.
Without objection.
Trump special counsel Jack Smith was involved in Lois Lerner IRS scandal.
Without objection.
Special counsel Jack Smith's mixed history pursuing high-profile politicians.
Without objection.
And FBI resisted opening probe into Trump's role on January 6th.
Without objection, the gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh,
I think it's our turn. Do you yield your time?
lost track after all those unanimous consent requests. Gentlelady from Washington is recognized, and then the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, thank you for coming here today. Your willingness to speak directly to us and to the American people about your investigation is professional, it's courageous, and it's patriotic. It's high time that the American people hear directly from you about the results of your investigation of President Donald Trump for his criminal actions leading up to and the day of January 6th, 2021. The facts, according to your report, are simple. Without a single piece of evidence, Trump sowed doubt about the 2020 election results and urged his followers to, quote, walk down to the Capitol and fight like hell on January 6th. And that's exactly what they did. Thousands of insurrectionists violently tried to stop Congress from certifying the 2020 election and doing our duty, and they assaulted law enforcement officers, some of whom are sitting right here in the chamber with us. I was trapped in the House gallery with a small number of members that day, and I will never forget the pounding on the doors and the insurrectionists threatening to kill us right outside. My Republican colleagues keep trying to rewrite history. They claim that somehow Trump's words and actions did not legally rise to the level of criminal activity, that he did not directly cause violence at the Capitol. And so I want to set that record straight with you right now. First of all, you successfully secured indictments against Donald Trump in 2 major federal cases: election interference in the 2020 election and mishandling of classified documents after leaving office. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you've been a federal prosecutor for nearly 30 years. You led this investigation, combing through hundreds of thousands of documents, photos, videos, and communication. Did your investigation find that Donald Trump attempted to manufacture fraudulent state slates of presidential electors in 7 states that he lost?
Yes.
Did he pressure state officials to ignore true vote counts in those states?
Yes.
Did he spread lies and conspiracies to his followers to make them believe that the election had been illegally rigged against him?
Yes.
Did he pressure DOJ officials to stop the certification of the election?
He did.
Did he pressure his own vice president, Mike Pence, to stop the certification against the oath of office that he had sworn to the Constitution?
He did.
And when all of this didn't work, did he, Donald Trump, motivate and inspire an angry mob to the U.S. Capitol to stop the certification?
Our proof showed that he caused what happened on January 6th, that it was foreseeable, and that he exploited that violence.
Did Donald Trump know that his allegations of election fraud were lies when he spread them?
Our proof was that he did, and we intended to prove that at trial.
In fact, as the quotes from your report behind me show, he even privately admitted that he lost the election, correct?
Yes.
He said, quote, "It doesn't matter if you won or lost the election, you have to fight like hell." And he said, "Can you believe I lost to this effing guy?" During your closed-door deposition last month, you and I had an exchange about the impact on our democracy, the toll on our democracy, for not holding a president accountable for trying to steal an election. Do you remember that exchange?
I do.
I want to return to it because I think what you said in the closed-door deposition is important for the American people to hear right here in your public testimony. How would you describe the toll on our democracy if we do not hold a president accountable for attempting to steal an election?
My belief is that if we do not hold the most powerful people in our society to the same standards of the rule of law, it can be catastrophic because if they don't have to follow the law, it's very easy to understand why people would think they don't have to follow the law as well. And so I think the law should be applied equally to everyone.
And what do you think the toll is for future elections and future presidents who try to steal an election?
I think if we don't hold people to account when they commit crimes, it sends a message that those crimes are okay, that our society accepts that. I believe that if we don't call people to account when they commit crimes in this context, it can endanger our election process, it can endanger election workers, and ultimately our democracy. The attack on this Capitol on January 6th was, and the Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. said this, it was an attack on the structure of our democracy.
And we could experience much worse results down the road if this happens again. I thank you for your work, for your courage, and for your patriotism, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Smith, just briefly, if there was no mob on January 6th that attacked the Capitol, we would not be here today, would we?
I can't speak to hypotheticals. The case I investigated involved a mob of supporters of Donald Trump's supporters.
Sure, I understand that. I understand that. But had there not been a mob that rushed the Capitol, if they had just stayed in the original speech, if they had obeyed the instruction, go peacefully and patriotically and make your voices heard, we would not be here. Isn't that correct?
Well, in that case, Donald Trump wouldn't have done many of the things.
I'm just asking. If they had gone peacefully and patriotically, we would not have had a special prosecutor. President Trump would not have been indicted. There would not have been, quote, the attack on the foundations of our democracy, correct?
That's a hypothetical, and I think it's a counterfactual hypothetical.
Well, and second point, in regards to what we just heard from my colleague from Washington, I think it's noteworthy that the vice president, despite the enormous toll that he has taken in these events, was against charging the president criminally in this case. But in regards to my own experience, Mr. Smith, I've charged many conspiracies. There's obviously a lot of benefit to that charge. It's a useful tool for fact-finding, scrutinizing evidence, figuring out exactly what happened, trying to form charges, trying to prove charges, trying to solidify the evidence. And in your case, sir, you've detailed, number one, the unprecedented criminal scheme, your words, not mine. In the press conference, you said there was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. Do you remember saying that?
I believe so, yes.
And in regards to your investigative authority, it was quite broad. We've already established that you had millions of dollars at your disposal. You had teams of lawyers. You had total subpoena power. You used campaign officials as witnesses. You subpoenaed millions of documents. You had civilian witnesses. You had political leaders. You had campaign officials that worked with the president, folks who were in the room. And after all of this, sir, you charged a conspiracy, and notably absent, there was no insurrection charged. There was no seditious conspiracy charged. And there was only one defendant, correct? Donald Trump.
That is correct.
Despite 6 co-conspirators identified in the indictment, only one person was charged. Is that correct?
Yes,
Despite there being an unprecedented criminal scheme, you did not find it necessary to charge anybody else who was admittedly, by your own evidence, involved in a criminal conspiracy that amounted to an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy.
yes. At the time of the conclusion of our work, my lawyers had determined, had believed that we did have proof to charge other people. I was in the process of making that determination when our work was concluded. But you are correct that the only person charged in this case was Donald Trump, who, in my estimation, was the person most culpable for the crimes charged.
Well, I understand your position, sir, but again, you started at the very top and only charged the top conspirator, in your opinion. You didn't charge anybody underneath him, correct?
Correct.
Despite that charge requirement, you would agree that a criminal conspiracy federally is a criminal agreement, correct?
Yes.
So by extension, people, under your theory, people besides the president were involved in the unprecedented assault on American democracy, but you didn't find it necessary to charge them criminally.
I had not yet charged anyone besides the president.
You didn't. You decided not to charge anybody but Donald Trump in that indictment.
Consistent with the federal principles of prosecution, which emphasize the degree of someone's culpability in making a charging decision, Donald Trump is the person that was charged.
I understand that. I understand your position, but you made the decision to charge one person and nobody else, correct?
I made the decision to make the charges in this case.
In regards to the way that the case handled from there, sir, I just want to get this on the record. In regards to your press conference, politics played no role, correct?
That is correct.
The charges you brought, politics played no role, correct?
Correct.
The expedited trial date played no role, politics played no role, correct?
I followed the facts and the law, department policy.
The speedy trial request, there was no role in politics, correct?
That's correct. Supreme Court precedent emphasizes that.
And even your brief that the court found atypical, politics played no role.
Mr. Chairman, the time has expired.
The time of the gentleman has expired. The gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for being here today. I believe it's important for the American people to finally hear from you directly about your investigations that you and your office conducted with integrity, following the facts and the law without fear or favor, as is department policy. And as people do hear from you, I think they're going to better understand why the White House and congressional Republicans are trying to rewrite history and seeking to discredit you in your investigation so that they can help the president avoid accountability for his crimes against the American people. So I'd like to move on from some of these baseless conspiracy theories we've been hearing and focus on your actual work as special counsel. In volume 1 of your report, you concluded that when it became clear that Mr. Trump had lost the election and that lawful means of challenging the election results had failed, he resorted to a series of criminal efforts to retain power. Chief among those criminal efforts was Mr. Trump's dissemination of demonstrably and often obviously false claims of election fraud in key states, claims that Donald Trump himself knew weren't true. In order to pressure officials to ignore vote tallies and submit fraudulent certificates of fake electors to Congress, he repeated these false claims and ultimately used them to direct an angry mob to attack the Capitol. So I represent southeastern Pennsylvania, which was one of the states targeted by Mr. Trump's criminal efforts. So being mindful of the clock, I wanted to try to explore 3 topics. First, the evidence that Trump made false claims of election fraud in Pennsylvania, knowing they were false. Second, the evidence concerning the submission of fake elector certificates from Pennsylvania to Congress. And third, why the evidence and witnesses concerning Trump's efforts in Pennsylvania were so compelling. So first up, in your report and deposition, you detailed the overwhelming evidence that Trump had lost Pennsylvania, and he knew it. Despite this, he and his co-conspirators continued to make false statements about that result to advance their criminal plan. Can you describe the evidence that these were false claims and they knew they were false, including statements by election officials, court cases, and conversations between Trump and his Republican allies in the state?
Sure. What springs to mind most immediately is I recall one particular claim that there were more votes than ballots than had been sent out. This was a claim that was obviously false because many even in the campaign knew that the reason for that discrepancy is we were talking about two different elections. One was the primary and one was the general election. My team interviewed Rudy Giuliani regarding that claim, and he admitted it was wrong. He admitted flat out that that was a mistake. And so that's one of several. With respect to witnesses in Pennsylvania, what springs to mind is the chair of the Republican Party, I believe, in Pennsylvania. This is relatively early, shortly after the election, had informed Donald Trump that the idea that fraud was the reason was not accurate. It was because of the counting of mail-in ballots, which was totally normal in this process. And again, this is someone who is a Republican who supported Donald Trump, but wanted him to win. I submit he would have been a credible witness at trial.
And I mean, a second part of this, in addition to making false claims about election results that they knew were false, and your deposition and report go into this in some detail, there was also this fraudulent elector plan where Trump and his co-conspirators solicited folks who had been planning to be Trump electors if he won and asking them to submit fake certificates to Congress. And I think what you found was pretty remarkable, including a former congressman who told the co-conspirators that this was illegal and it was an attempt to overturn the government. Is that right?
That's correct. That particular elector, who was signed up to be a legitimate elector had Donald Trump in fact won the election, was a former U.S. attorney and former member of this Congress.
I mean, the bottom line is that despite the facts and over objections from his allies, Trump still went to the ellipse on January 6th and lied about Pennsylvania's votes to direct his angry mob to attack the Capitol. So I just want to thank you for your work and your years of service to the country, and I would invite everyone to read your deposition and to read the report, because it tells a very different story than what our colleagues do.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into a record a speech by former Vice President Pence published on C-SPAN in June of 23, in which he calls the president's comments on January 6th reckless. President Trump was wrong then, he's wrong now. Anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president, and anyone who asks someone else to put them over the Constitution should never be president.
Without objection.
And
the gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, you've said several times in your deposition that you believe that the facts and the law, your interpretation of the law, would lead to a conviction of President Trump. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did you believe that same thing, that your interpretation of the law, your reading of the law, would have resulted in the conviction when you went after Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell back in 2014? Did you believe it at the time?
I did believe, and
ultimately you got a conviction in lower court, but that was overturned by the Supreme Court, correct?
Yes, the Supreme Court changed the law on what constituted an official act, and
Actually,
as a
that's
result,
incorrect.
that conviction was overturned.
That's incorrect. They applied the law, and they said in their ruling, our concern is not with tawdry tales of Ferraris, Rolexes, and ball gowns. It's instead with the broader legal implications of the government's boundless interpretation of the federal bribery statute. A more limited interpretation of the term official act leaves ample room for prosecuting corruption while comporting with the text of the statute and the precedent of this court. They accused you of using a boundless interpretation of the federal bribery statutes. Now, did you believe when you went after John Edwards that your interpretation of the facts and the law were correct and that you would convict John Edwards of corruption?
Yes.
But in fact, that case resulted in a jury deadlock on 5 charges and acquittal on another charge. Is that correct?
That is my recollection. That's correct.
Let's move on to the court's interpretation of your gag order requests. Mr. Smith, America was founded on the principle that the government doesn't silence political speech, in particular speech before it happens. You sought a prior restraint against President Trump without a single violation of pretrial release. In fact, there was no real-world harm that you could articulate justified giving the federal government the power to silence him as a presidential candidate, was there?
The court granted those motions and found that the prosecutor did not have to wait until someone was harmed to make such a motion.
Actually, the request was rejected when the case was actually, when you actually were not able to, it was restricted, correct? The gag order was restricted, correct?
Well, we filed for an order in the district court. The district court granted an order. President Trump appealed that order. The Court of Appeals absolutely agreed that there was a basis and that the threats to witnesses that came from the targeting by Donald Trump were real and that we had a duty to protect them. You are correct in that the Court of Appeals narrowed the order, so the order covered witnesses, court staff, the judge, and my staff. The difference was that it didn't cover me anymore, which I was fine with.
Did you have any evidence that President Trump's statements about the cases against him intimidated witnesses or prevented them from coming forward?
I had evidence that he said, if you come after me, I'm coming after you. He suggested a witness should be put to death. The courts found that those sort of statements not only deter witnesses who've come forward, they deter witnesses who have yet to come forward.
But you weren't able to identify a single witness who didn't come forward because they were intimidated by President Trump.
We had extremely thorough evidence that his statements were having an effect on the proceedings that is not permitted in any court of law in the United States.
Don't you think it's a pretty low bar to clear if you're trying to silence a candidate for president? I mean, if you can't identify a single witness who's intimidated, that maybe you should reconsider the gag order?
Both courts upheld the orders, and it is not incumbent on a prosecutor to wait until someone gets killed before they move for an order to protect the proceedings.
Did anyone on your team raise concerns that this expansive gag order you were seeking would infringe on President Trump's First Amendment rights?
My recollection is that we, of course, discussed First Amendment issues regarding this application because I and my staff respect the First Amendment, but the First Amendment does not allow one to make statements that interfere with the administration of justice in a judicial proceeding. My interpretation was supported and agreed upon by the district court and the Court of Appeals in terms of the phenomena of the statements being made, targeting individuals, causing threats to happen to them. I would also add, sir, that in the days after Donald Trump made some of these statements, the district court, in this case, received vile threats to the district court's life. In that environment, I felt a duty as a prosecutor to make that motion, and I make no apologies.
And the court stayed that motion on August 3rd, 2024. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I should have mentioned this a little bit earlier. Mr. Smith, if ever you need a break, if you need a restroom break, you or your counsel can just let us know. I think it's now the gentleman from Colorado gets 5 minutes.
Mr. Smith.
Can they? Yep. Can we take a short break?
5-10 minute recess, then we'll be right back at it. Hey, committee will be in order.
Mr. Chairman, will you?
Committee will be in order. Would the members of the audience will please sit down or remove themselves from the committee room. Sit down, please. I had to call him in.
Thank you, Officer Fanone. Mr. Chairman, please control the deranged observer, Mr. Rakeland, so he doesn't create any other problems with us today.